You are listening to the Booktrospective Podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominique.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And this week we are doing A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas.
Woohoo!
We are continuing into the Maasiverse. We have a very long way to go.
Very long.
But yeah, so we are continuing on. But Keely, how was your week?
My week has been good. Bit busy. Because Tuesday was Tristan's birthday, his fourth birthday.
Yeah.
We went to the movies. He was so excited. We went to see Migration, and that was such a good
Was it
movie.
cute? I thought it looked cute.
So good. But yeah, it's been busy, but not busy at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. My week's kind of anticlimactic, I guess. I'm thrown off because my Monday was like a Sunday, and so I feel like I've been playing catch up all week. And I don't know. Today is weird. I was like behind on reading. I'm struggling. I'm just trying to get to I can't wait for June. When we get to June, my life will be so much easier. It probably won't be, but I think when I get to June, my life will be easier. So let's just get right into it because this is probably going to be a long episode, but it seems like now they're all kind of long episodes. I just don't know. It might be a short episode. I don't know. So Keely, are you doing the blurb or are you doing your review?
I'm doing the blurb.
Okay.
So, Feyre has returned to the Spring Court, determined to gather information on Tamlin's actions and learn what she can about the invading king threatening to bring her land to its knees. But to do so, she must play a deadly game of deceit. One slip could bring doom not only for Feyre, but for everything and everyone she holds dear. As war bears down upon them all, Feyre endeavors to take her place amongst the High Fae of the land, balancing her struggle to master the powers, both magical and political, and her love for her court and family. Amidst these struggles, Feyre and Rhysand must decide who to trust amongst the cunning and lethal High Lords, and hunt for allies in unexpected places. In this thrilling third book of the #1 New York Times bestselling series, the fate of Feyre's world is at stake as armies grapple for power over the one thing that could destroy it all.
Ooh. So this is the third installment of the ACOTAR series. So we had A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is ACOTAR. We had A Court of Mist and Fury, which is ACOMAF, and then this is ACOWAR, so A Court of Wings and Ruin. There's currently, I don't know if she considers it a book 4, which is A Court of Frost and Starlight, but it's kind of like a novella, and then there's A Court of Silver Flames, and then her next book that should release is ACOTAR 5 or 6, whatever number she considers it to be. So, ACOWAR picks up with Feyre back in the Spring Court. So brief summary of the last 2 books if you're just randomly hopping into this episode for some reason. Feyre is a human turned Fae who saved all of the Fae in the country or land of Prithian from a evil Fae queen kind of person. And was in love with one Fae, but ended up feeling extremely smothered by that Fae. He's not a king. They have kings, but they also have what they call High Lords, which are essentially like kings. And so she left his home and went to another where she found allies in what is known as the Night Court and realized that High Lord was actually her mate. And so Tamlin, who was in the Spring Court, is the High Lord of the Spring Court, was upset that she was gone, and so he made a deal with another evil man known as the King of Hybern, and basically sold out her sisters that were still human to get her back. And so at the end of A Court of Mist and Fury, which was book 2, Feyre goes back to the Spring Court with Tamlin, as kind of a way to protect her sisters who have been turned into Fae as she has. And her sisters go to the Night Court with her mate, Rhysand. And so ACOWAR opens up with her back into the Spring Court. She is... can't think of a good word to describe what she's doing, without spoiling what she's doing. But she's in the Spring Court. Tamlin is there. Lucian is there, which is his emissary and kind of like his best friend. Ianthe is a priestess, and she is around. She is actually the one who really sold out her sister, so we hate her. And so she's all there, but Feyre is really like out for revenge. So she gets that, and she ends up back in the Night Court. And we learned in ACOMAF, in book 2, that there is a war brewing, not between necessarily the humans and the Fae, but really among the Fae, because the evil Fae, or the King of Hybern, really wants to demolish the wall that protects the Fae from like taking over the human world and making them slaves again. So Rhysand and Feyre and all of that team really want to prevent that from happening. So the Night Court is really trying to ally themselves with the rest of the Fae of Prythian. However, the Night Court, for years and centuries have kind of presented themselves as this evil court, even though that wasn't true, but that was how they protected themselves. So now they have to convince all these other people that they're not actually evil. And so this book basically, where ACOMAF was more of a love story between Feyre and Rhysand, this book is more of action and really trying to see if they're going to be able to save Prythian from the King of Hybern and save the human realm from the King of Hybern as well. So that's as spoiler free as I can get. It is so hard to do spoiler free on like a mid-series book.
Yeah.
That is extremely hard. So, do you have a word that would describe this book?
I do. I came prepared today.
Yeah, look, show me up.
My word would be cunning.
Ooh, that is a good one. Mine's gonna be mischievous.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one too.
Okay, so if you have not read any of the ACOTAR series, what
are you doing here?
What are you doing here? Pause, go and follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram so you can keep up to date. Go read those books in some way, shape, or form, and then come back. But if you've been listening along, or you've already been spoiled anyways and you don't care to be spoiled more, then I am more than welcoming you to continue on, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So ACOWAR opens up in kind of like a flashback with Rhysand, and it's 2 years before the wall was formed, which I cannot remember when the wall was formed, but it was like 500 years ago or something like that. So it's 2 years before that, and Rhys is kind of just wandering around the field of dead bodies, really trying to look and make sure that Cassian and Azriel are not among the dead. He does not find them, and we know that they're not dead because they're alive and well in current day. So this book is actually broken up into 3 parts. So part 1 is the Princess of Carrion. So we open up with Feyre in the Spring Court, and she's really just pretending to be docile. She is a wolf in sheep's clothing, as they like to say, which is funny because Sarah J. Maas always uses wolf references. Like, she loves to talk about a wolf. But she is very in control of her powers. She's basically like in the study painting, and she gets pissed off and like snaps the paintbrush, so she doesn't want anybody to see it, so then she burns it and then calls in wind to blow it out of the window. Like, she does all of that seamlessly, so she has a really good handle on her powers now. And she goes and talks to Lucian, because Lucian basically is letting her know that Ianthe has come for their meeting, and he's surprised that she's so open to meeting with Ianthe, because Ianthe is really the main, Ianthe is the one that she even told about her sisters. Obviously Tamlin knew where they were, but she gave all the real details to Ianthe, and Ianthe is the one who sold out her sisters to Hybern. So even if Feyre was like all the way back with Tamlin, like, she still would have every right to be mad at Ianthe.
Right.
So he just can't believe that she's okay with her coming for a meeting, but she's there, and Lucien is demanding to know where Elaine is, because as we know, at the end of book 2, Elaine went with Rhysand to the Night Court, and Feyre says that she doesn't know where she is, and she's like, you don't even know who Elaine is. Like you, right. I understand they have a mating bond, but like, you don't even know her. So Ianthe comes and says that basically she sold out the sisters because she thought it would be helpful, and basically was like, well, I mean, now you get to have them for the rest of your life. I mean, okay, but like, not really. Right. I don't have them right now. So, and they don't want to be like that. And it wasn't like it was pleasant. So, no. And so Lucien basically can't stand what happened at Hybern, because they didn't know about the sister part. Like him and Tamlin kind of agreed with like allowing Hybern to use the Spring Court as access, because the Spring Court borders the wall, but they didn't know about the sister part. So Lucien's pissed about how everything happened as well. And he's kind of like, the only one verbalizing any of this, but Tamlin is still team Ianthe. Like, he is such an idiot, and I hate him. So there's that. Feyre tells Ianthe basically like, never do that again, and like, we'll be okay, I guess. Feyre tells Tamlin that his people will never be at peace if Hybern is like, up in the Spring Court. And Tamlin says that part of his bargain with Hybern, which was like a true bargain where they don't get tattoos in the Spring Court, but it's a bargain is a bargain. Mm-hmm. And so that Hybern agreed that the Spring Court wouldn't be harmed. So like, as a reminder, bargains are like magically binding, and so if they are not upheld, like, you basically could die or something terrible could happen to you. Tamlin also says that the East is going to be safe. And so Feyre's basically like using all these meetings to garner information. So she's like, okay, so that means Hybern's going to be coming from the West. And he tells her that Jurian is going to be coming tomorrow. So flashback or reminder, Jurian was a human army leader who Amarantha killed because he supposedly was having a relationship with her sister and then killed the sister. And so Amarantha killed him and was like wearing his eyeball and finger bone. And so Jurian was reborn with the cauldron. So at the end of book 2, that's where Feyre and Rhys and all them tried to get the cauldron from the King of Hybern, and they couldn't, but he used that to bring Jurian back. And so he is reborn, but he's still human. He's not Fae like Feyre's sisters. So just because you go in the cauldron doesn't mean you come out as Fae. Feyre knows that Jurian must be like mad, like mentally messed up from his imprisonment. I mean, Amarantha wore him on her hand for like 500 years, since the war. So, and he obviously like he was aware because he knows all these things. So that is, I can't even imagine like
having a consciousness and not like,
like that is a fate worse than death. I cannot. That's terrible. That was terrible. I feel for you, Jurian. And so Tamlin basically had kept his promise to allow Feyre to be in meetings. So that's how she learned this information, which is that, one, the cauldron has lost some of its power since her sister's transformation. And so her first secret task is basically to figure out how long that her and Rhys and the Night Court are going to have before Hybern can attack, and how is Hybern planning to attack. She doesn't use her bond to talk to Rhys as much because she doesn't want it to be detected. Like, she doesn't know if talking down their bond will strengthen the scent. And she knows that people can scent, like, him on her, but she doesn't know if they just assume, like, it'll fade over time or what, but she doesn't want to risk it. So she doesn't talk to him too much. But she does send him a quick message, just like, is everybody okay? And she asks about her sisters, and he tells her that everyone's okay, but her bond with him does seem very far away. Jurian comes with 2 Hybern commanders who happen to be twins, a brother and a sister named, the boy's name is Prince Dagden and the girl is Princess Branna. And they are actually Hybern's niece and nephew. And they are like strange twins, like kissing cousin type of twins. Like, they don't go anywhere without each other, even the bathroom kind of twins.
Give you the odd vibe.
Yeah, very, very ick. Give me the ick. And so they come in and they're like staring and smiling like weird at Feyre, which Tamlin's like already pissed about. Jurian says that, they're just curious about the woman who launched a war. And Feyre says that he should have gone to war over Miriam, which a reminder again, Miriam was a half fae, half human who Jurian actually was in love with. And so he really only was kind of like had a relationship with her and with Amarantha's sister. Well, Miriam had a relationship with him and then this other prince, Dragon. And so Miriam was supposed to have died during the war, or at least that's what Jurian was told or knows, but she really didn't. And so Feyre was like, oh, well, like, you should have done the same thing if you cared about her so much. Jurian tells her she needs to be careful, and Feyre says, don't threaten me in my home. But she really says it because she knows Tamlin's listening, so she's like, my home. Like, he can, like, oh, yeah, this is your home. Like, throw up. And she's like, her whole plan is, like, to pit Jurian against Tamlin. Like, she's just trying, she's real good at the mind games. And they're planning to go to the wall tomorrow because basically the twins want to see where all of the holes are in the wall that they can possibly shatter this wall. Feyre offers for her and Lucien to go with them, and Tamlin is going to stay behind. But Tamlin doesn't say anything because he's like just happy to have her back, and he's like, you know, he's towing the line. He doesn't want to ruffle any feathers. Jurian says that Elaine is probably being passed around by the Illyrians in the Night Court just to try to like egg Lucien on, and then Tamlin threatens to make him sleep outside. Dagden starts bragging about how Tamlin's family used to keep Illyrian wings when they killed them, which we know because that's what was said to happen to Rhys's mom and sister when they were killed. And Feyre mentions how she had been looking for their wings since she got back to the Spring Court, but she hasn't been able to find them. Jurian tells Feyre, I fought side by side with your High Lord, and Tamlin says Rhys is not her High Lord. And Jurian asks, where is Miriam? And admits that basically he tried to resurrect her with the cauldron, so he knows that she's not dead. And Feyre was like, oh crap, like he knows she's not dead. Then Jurian says he heard that Feyre was sleeping with Rhys before she ever even left Tamlin for good, and she feels like a tap at her mental shields, and so she like basically knows that the twins are Daemati, so they're like her, they have mind powers, and so basically she knows the game is like Jurian's supposed to try to like upset and distract her so that the twins can get her minds. So mentally she lashes out at them, and she like puts her feelers out basically because they're also trying to get in like Tamlin and Lucien's minds as well. So she's trying to protect everybody. And that night she basically stays up all night too because she's worried that they're going to try to get into everybody's mind. And her power from the Day Court, which is healing powers, is what allows her to be able to detect their ability to do that. So they go to the wall, and there are currently 4 holes in the wall. So there's one that's kind of close, and then the next hole is 2 days away from them, and then the one after that is 2 days away from that hole. So they're all kind of spaced out. So they're at this first hole, and the twins are inspecting everything. And Lucien tells Feyre that whatever you're planning, it's going to get us in trouble. And she's basically like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. And she asked Lucien if he had, because Lucien wasn't alive during the war. So she's like, if you had been alive during the war, what side would you have been on? And he says the human side. So she's like, okay, so then why are you working with Hybern? And he basically like goes off into a tangent. And he's like, he starts telling her how the day that all that went down with Tamlin locking her in the house, he actually beat Tamlin home that day and found her melted ring. He hid it from Tamlin, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I didn't melt the ring. And he says that Hybern was a trap. He didn't know what would happen there. And basically, like, the reason that Lucien's like telling her this is because he wants her to know that he basically was trying to like protect Tamlin, but he also like, he's not trying to hurt her. Like, Lucien's basically like, I'm kind of he's always trying to be innocent, basically. Jurian sees them talking and says that Lucien better be careful, basically, because he sees, like, you see what happens to men who get close to Tamlin's woman. And so then we go to Jurian and Ianthe. And Jurian hates Ianthe just like every other man does, except for Tamlin. Tamlin's the only man that doesn't hate Ianthe. And Feyre can tell that there's weird tension between Ianthe and Lucien, and she basically is like, okay, what's up? And he doesn't want to tell her, and so she's like, did Ianthe get with Tamlin during the rite while she was gone? And he says no, and so she asks him about Calamai. So if you remember, Calamai from the first book is the spring like ritual where Tamlin like invokes this spring beast power, I don't know, and he goes in a cave and like picks a woman and basically has sex with her, and that like brings power back to the court and the earth for like the year. And so basically calamite happened again while she was gone with Rhys. And so Lucien says no. Tamlin refused to do the right this time. So in order for them to maintain their magic, Lucien took his place. And of course, Ianthe signed her up to be like the female that he chose. So he basically was like, I did it, like, you know, whatever. And then we're been done with it. And basically Ianthe's been satisfied and doesn't bother him anymore. But he begs her not to tell Elaine, which why the hell would Elaine care? Like, I don't even know. Again, right. I don't know you.
Right.
So the twins are still like asking for info like on the night court, and Feyre basically is like, I don't know anything, because they're trying to like figure out this wall stuff, and she's like, I don't know anything, like I told you I don't remember everything, blah blah blah. Back home at the spring court, she's getting dressed for some kind of, I think it's summer solstice is coming up. So she's looking at dresses, and Alice is complaining because now none of her dresses fit, because the last time she was in the spring court, she was wasting away and was like too small. Now she's been healthy, and now she's like big again, and none of her dresses fit. Alice tells her how Tamlin basically shredded all of her night court clothes, and how she was the one that night when Moore came and got her that begged Moore to take her. And when Tamlin came home, Alice basically pretended that Feyre had been kidnapped. Alice also says that when they were under the mountain, no one said that Rhys was ever mean to the servants. So, like, Alice never was under the mountain, but the servants were. And so now that everyone's out, Alice is basically saying all the servants say that Rhys was never mean to them, and how people think that Feyre was like reborn wrong, but Alice thinks that she was reborn just right. Alice is also originally from the Summer Court, and so she tells Feyre that her cousin from the Summer Court also mentioned how Feyre visited and was like very nice and happy while she was there. And Alice just begs Feyre to spare her boys whenever Feyre decides to take her revenge on the Spring Court, but Feyre's still denying everything. And I'm like, Feyre, everybody but Tamlin knows what you're doing. Everybody but Tamlin knows what you're doing, because he's an idiot. So the solstice is literally one of the funniest things. So Feyre basically steals Ianthe's shine. So Ianthe is a priestess who has absolutely no power, but Ianthe like basically plays on the elements to make it look like she does. So Ianthe like goes out, and before the like solstice, because it's like basically when the sun rises. So she basically has this like stone that marks exactly where the sun's gonna rise, so that when she stands on this stone and like raises her arms up like in a O shape, the sun will rise directly behind her and look like she's like lighting up or whatever. But Feyre knows this. So Feyre like gets dressed this morning in all white, and she looks all like pure and innocent. She got like flowers in her hair. And so they're all outside, and like the twins are out there. They hate rituals. They think all this is stupid anyways. And she's like egging them on because it makes Ianthe even more dramatic. So she's like just making Ianthe more annoying. And so the sun starts rising, but Feyre has moved the stones just a little bit so that Feyre is where the stones are.
She was a boss for that.
Yeah, that was so smart.
My favorite part.
I love it. Ianthe is like basically like, so like the sun starts rising, and like Feyre has on white too, so like the sun rises, and then like Ianthe's like, blessings from the god, whatever she says, and so like Feyre starts glowing. And so Ianthe's like shook. And then they said like, so they go to like lunch or whatever. So Ianthe spends like the next 6 hours talking about how this was purposeful. And like how, oh, the cauldron blessed my friend. And like basically anyone that would listen to her, she was like trying to convince that like it was purposeful that this happened. But like Feyre's just like cracking up because like, no, you're just stupid. And so she's like thinking to herself how Rhys would have loved her show, and Rhys speaks to her mind, and he's like, it would have been an honor to be in the presence of Feyre Cauldron blessed. And he's like, basically he's like, when are you gonna come home to me? And she says soon. And like did they like just have like a cute little conversation. Then she goes over to Tamlin and asks him to dance. So Tamlin's like shocked because like she don't mess with him like that. And so when she goes to bed that night, she has a nightmare, but she's glad that she does, because she gets up and she decides, I'm gonna go to Lucien's room. So she runs to Lucien's room all like frazzled, and he like opens the door. He's half dressed. He only got his pants on, like got no shirt on, got his chest out. And she uses her water powers from Tarquin to make tears, and she like grabs Lucien, so they're like embraced. And so she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, like blah blah blah. And of course Tamlin comes, and he's pissed because even in ACOTAR, like in the first book, Tamlin was like, Lucien, Lucien's kind of flirty anyways, and he was like, back off basically back then. So plus now she's been with Rhys, like Tamlin is not having like any male attention on Feyre. So like of course like her because, the reason that she's even near Lucien is because Tamlin destroyed her old room. Like, Feyre goes in there and it's like there's vines covering, like, all the furniture is torn. So they had to move rooms. So now her room is right next to Lucien's. And so that's why she goes to him anyways. And so she knew that Tamlin would find him. And she does something with her powers to, like, ensure that she put up, like, a windshield so that so that Lucien wouldn't hear Tamlin coming. And then, like, boop, there he is. And she also had wore, like, her skimpiest nightgown so that, like, it's just scandalous.
She knew what she was doing.
Yeah, she is playing the long game here, for sure. So after that night, Lucien is basically, like, staying away from Feyre because Tamlin is on his, like, neck. And then all of a sudden, these keys come up missing from one of the guards. And Ianthe comes in and she's like, oh, there's a blight on my garden. Oh, the cauldron, something's wrong. Oh my God. Like, so dramatic. And everybody's like, we could care less. Like Feyre says, okay, tell the gardeners. And she's like, it's not a gardening problem. There's a blight. It's a magic problem. And so Ianthe tells Tamlin, like, maybe you should just give Rhys, like, his family's wings, and this might end the dispute. Maybe that's what's going on. And Tamlin admits, like, I burned their wings a long time ago. And Feyre's like, he actually looks sad about it. Like, he just has guilt from, his family have ever doing that. So, I just can't with Ianthe. Like, she is such a bitch. I just cannot. So they go to the next hole in the wall, and this one is 2 days away. So they have to winnow there. So they also have to stay. And Tamlin again does not go. So they have to pitch a tent. And so Lucien and Feyre are going to share a tent, which I was like, okay. So Lucien is like, Tamlin's just territorial because you guys haven't had sex yet. And Feyre's like, yeah, I don't want to be touched like that. Like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And Lucien basically tells Feyre that the letter that she had wrote from the Night Court and what happened in the forest when he tried to come and get her and she, like, grew wings and all that stuff basically is what made Tamlin go ahead with his plan for Hybern. Because Lucien kind of had been, like, on Tamlin about doing something, but Tamlin had been like, no, like, because he never is about that action. Mm-hmm. But like writing that letter and then him, like, almost getting her, but she getting away is what made him go to Hybern. Tamlin also killed, like, all the servants that day that she was taken, which was literally, what would they have done? Like, what would they have done to stop more? Nothing. But he killed all of them. Lucien, like, he actually, like, kind of slips up and he basically says, like, Hybern was closing on them regardless. So basically it was like, he basically says, like, it was either we were going to be stuck between Hybern and the Night Court or just the Night Court. So, like, basically they had to choose a side and they picked one. And then he's basically like, oops, I said too much. So Branna sees her and Lucien talking, and Branna's basically like, I would choose Lucien too, because the Autumn Court men have fire in them. And basically, like, during the war, she had, like, slept with a bunch of them, which I can't possibly believe because she only likes her brother, but whatever. Maybe 500 years ago, she didn't like her brother. I don't know. So the next morning, they wake up and Feyre has, like, rolled up against Lucien for warmth, she says. But, just being scandalous. But they go to the hole in the wall. They're inspecting it. And who is there but 3 children of the Blessed? So if you remember from book 1, in the human villages, there are these people or these kids who are called the children of the Blessed, and they worship the Fae because most of the humans are terrified and hate the Fae. But they believe, the children of the Blessed believe if they go to Prythian that they'll be, like, adored and cherished and all these things. And we know that's not true. So the children are, like, so happy that they found Fae. And the twins are like, yes, like, dinner, like, fun times. Like, they're so happy. And so Lucien, Feyre, and even Jurian are like, why are you here? You need to go. So Feyre gets into their minds and, like, basically shows them all the terrible things, like, under the mountain, like, all the Hybern, like, all the bad things that have happened, and is basically using that as a way to get them to leave. And they, like, Branna's like, oh, like, come in. And so after she does that, they're like, no, thank you. And they, like, turn around and run. And Jurian's like, thanks. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So they have to spend another night at the wall. And that night, everyone else is off doing something. So just her and Jurian are, like, around the fire talking. And basically, Feyre says something to him about being Hybern's pet, and Jurian's like, I'm not Hybern's dog. And Jurian says that Miriam basically left him as soon as he put his people, so the humans, before her. And also he says that Miriam was the one that told him to sleep with Amarantha's sister to get info out of her. So he wasn't, like, just cheating on her, like, it was their plan, he says. He also says that everyone thinks Rhys is heartless and cruel, but he doesn't, because he said during the war, Rhys basically risked his entire, like, team or whatever to go in and save Miriam. Like, he knew that everyone was going to get caught, but he still did it because Miriam was his friend, and he went against orders to do so. And he also goes, Rhys is supposed to be the most powerful High Lord, yet he hasn't come to claim his mate. But he was like, perhaps he hasn't lost you at all. Like, basically, like, did he lose you, or did he let you come here? Because something about that is sus.
Right.
And Jurian just tells her, like, Hybern will kill all of you. The next morning, Feyre wakes up, and her and Lucien smell like rot and blood. And Branna and Dagnan have chased those kids down and killed them. Like, horribly demolished them. So they go back to the Spring Court, and Tamlin is pissed because Lucien and Feyre were pissed about that, and they wanted to figure out what they could do, because they considered, like, burying them, but they were like, no, because I'm not going to just do, like, clean up their dirty work for them. So Lucien hunted down the bogey, and they sent the bogey after them. And Tamlin's pissed, so he kicks Lucien out. And Feyre, like, basically he keeps pushing Tamlin. And this was her goal, because he explodes, because we know that he is a walking red flag and can't control his anger. And she purposely does not shield herself. And so she gets, like, debris, like, the table hits her and, like, flying debris. So she gets, like, a cut on her face and, like, is bleeding. And so, of course, he immediately starts begging and, oh, I'm so sorry, and all that stuff. Just like he did the last time he did that. So Lucien comes in, and he comes in to get her, and, like, what did you do? And her cheek is bleeding, and Tamlin's begging. And Rhys, like, comes down the bond. He's like, I want you home. And he's like, I'm going to kill Tamlin. And then he starts, like, sending, like, naughty images also. So after that, Tamlin has one of his sentry, like, hung up. So apparently this sentry fell asleep at the gate, and also is the same sentry whose keys were missing. And because the keys were missing, the Naga, I believe, one of those, like, vicious creatures or whatever, was able to get in and attack. So, of course, they're all out here. So the sentry, Tamlin, Lucien, the other sentries, Feyre. And Ianthe's like, I want 20 lashes. And the sentry's like, I never fall asleep. And he's like, I saw Ianthe out there. Like, she drugged me. And she's like, you would dare, like, speak against me, blah, 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 blah. So Feyre's like, I want to hear his story. Because, one, Feyre does want to hear the story. But two, she's like, I'm going to, like, pit them against each other. So they're going back and forth. And so Ianthe, like, knows how to work Tamlin. And she goes, like, it's protocol. Like, basically, like, if you don't do this, you're weak. So Tamlin goes against his people that have supported him, his people who he was sending out past the wall, disguised as wolves, and, like, allowing them to be killed, like Andrus, who Feyre killed, just to, like, try to break the curse, who would literally do anything for him. He goes against them, all because Ianthe, who is lying, and everyone, like, can put together that she's lying. So Ianthe basically won. She destroyed her own garden, because the whole solstice thing, because she's an idiot. She stole the keys and let the Naga in, and, like, basically this is all a ploy to, like, get Tamlin and get back in the good graces. So he makes one of the sentries give this sentry, like, 20 lashes. And then Ianthe's like, okay, let's go to lunch. I'm parched. Like, what? So Feyre stays behind, and she, like, cleans the sentry up. And they all, like, stay, they thank her, and they're basically, like, they apologize, and they apologize for never doing anything, basically, like, the entire time she's ever been in the Spring Court. So they have to go out to the wall again, and this time, Ianthe and Tamlin join them. Or they're planning on joining them. They're going to go tomorrow. So Alice tells her, like, look, I'm leaving tomorrow when you do. She's like, I'm going back to the summer court. I'm getting my boys. And Feyre is basically like, don't ever mention my name in the summer court. She's like, I have a blood ruby. And Alice knows what that means. And so she's like, you know what? She's like, no matter what, you always have a place with me in the summer court if you need it. And so they go out to the wall. And Feyre is like, my powers are struggling. I have a headache. She's like eating this apple. And she requests to share a tent with Ianthe because, one, she doesn't want to share a tent with Tamlin. She also doesn't want Ianthe to be able to, like, sleep with Lucien. So she's like, I'll sleep with Ianthe. And the twins go and survey the wall. So she's like, I'll go with them. And everyone else is, like, out prowling the woods or whatever they're doing. And so she gets them to talk and learns that basically Hybern's army is 10 times bigger the size than than her and like Rhys thought that it was. And she basically has got all the information now that she needs to go home, and everyone's gone, so it's the perfect time to sneak out. So basically what the twins tell her is, one, the army's huge, and they basically plan to bring down the wall, and they use Amarantha as basically a distraction for years to like get everything they need, like find the cauldron. And so that's basically the plan. And so she knows when she leaves that Tamlin and Ianthe are going to lie and cover it up, because he's going to look like an idiot that he lost her twice. So they're probably not going to tell everyone that she's gone. And so she's basically trying to come up with some way that there's a story that the twins tried to kill her. So she has like been like packed extra stuff. Like she's been bringing stuff with her every time just in case she left. So she grabs her stuff and she's getting ready to go. Like she winnows a little bit. And as she leaves, or as she is leaving, she hears Lucien telling Ianthe to back off. And she's like, damn it, I can't leave him. So, she goes into like the clearing, and Ianthe is surprised that basically Lucien doesn't want her. Like she's like, I thought like you would come and see me after the rite or whatever. Like, no, girl,
Makes me sick.
You're disgusting. And basically, Feyre knows that because she feels bad, because she knows that because she's been like butting up to Lucien to try to make Tamlin upset, that has made Ianthe jealous. And that's the whole reason that she's doing this. So Ianthe has Lucien bound up by these like magical stones, and she's like she's got his shirt all open, like rubbing on him. And Feyre's pissed. So she like gets into her brain and she says, stop. And she does. And Lucien's like, oh my God. So she's like, pick up that rock. So she does. And she's like, now smash your hand. And
Feyre's a real one for this. Like,
she just makes her smash her hand like 20 times, like over. She's like, the first time it was like wet, like bleh. And then she just like, like her fingers go to like just crushing her hand like over and over. And she goes, you will never touch another person unless they are like consenting to it, basically. And then she's like, and you won't remember what happened to you. She's like, you're allowed to go to a healer, but you're not allowed to get like not have scars. Like you can get your hand healed, but not the scars. And she goes, she said, I've been debating on slitting your throat. She said, I debated it this morning in the tent. I've actually been debating it every day since, what happened or whatever. But she was like, this is a better punishment. And she said, I hope you live a very long life, Ianthe. And Lucien is shook. And then all of a sudden behind her, like Branna comes out and like tells like Lucien, like the word you're looking for is Daemati. So Branna asks like, so where are you going? And she asked Feyre, like, haven't you wondered about the headaches you're having? So basically they've been giving everyone Faebane. So they were like, we didn't even have to like use mind powers on Ianthe. They told Ianthe agreed to like grind up Faebane, and they've been slowly feeding it in all their food, putting it in the water they used to grow food in the freaking garden. So like the apple that she was just eating was grown with Faebane. So that's why like her bond with Rhys was sounding muffled, like everything. That's why she was getting a headache. And so they knew that she was planning on leaving. And so Feyre debates leaving Lucien, but she doesn't because she knows he'll be killed. And so she like basically she starts winnowing, and her and Lucien both like attack, and they both are able to kill Dagden and Branna. So she kills Dagden and Lucien kills Branna. So before her power is gone, like her and Lucien are able to winnow far enough away, and before she does, she tells Ianthe to tell everyone that Feyre, killed Branna and Dagden while Tamlin and Ianthe watched, and Lucien is basically horrified because he knows that that's going to make everyone in the Spring Court abandon Tamlin. He's like, Feyre. And Lucien says like, I'm going with you. And she's like, no, you're not. And he's like, yes, I am. Because obviously he wants to get to Elaine. So they get as far as away as they can. And basically he's like, you're going to use a door. So if you remember, there are doors to some of the other courts. And there's one, like the Spring Court is kind of like access to everything. So there's one to Under the Mountain, which is sealed off. There's one to Summer, but obviously she can't go to Summer. And so the only other one is to Autumn, which Lucien absolutely doesn't want to go there, but that's their last choice. And there's no guards. And he's like, let me guess, you told all the guards to not be here. And she's like, yeah. As they're going in, she hears like a roar, and she knows like Tamlin is probably just found out that she's on the loose. So she plans on keeping moving until her magic comes back so Rhys can find her. So they hide in the cave. She has like a whole pack of supplies, and Lucien is like, oh my God, like you really planned on doing this. And he says that he knew she was lying when she did that light thing at Highburn because his friend at the Dawn Court can do the same thing. And he admits, like, I'm only here for Elaine. And she says, yeah, not because you know Tamlin was wrong. And you don't even know Elaine. And they like try to sleep, but neither one of them sleeping. She don't trust Lucien, and Lucien, I don't know. So Lucien's like, basically, we have to avoid Autumn as much as possible. They can't eat any of the food that she brought because they don't know if it's been poisoned. So Lucy Lou goes out there and fishes with his bare hands like a badass. I'm like, okay. And they basically hike north for 5 days without really speaking or doing anything. And she wishes she would have used the last of her powers to send Rhys a message, and realizes that, again, this is why her bond had been so weak. Lucien says that if anyone sees them in the Autumn Court, they'll sell him out, especially after like what happened to, what's her name? Jasminda, I think. So because she was just like kind of like a lower fae. So basically like even the lower fairies, like they really kind of hate Lucien because not only is he high fae, but then one of their people got killed and he basically didn't do anything to stop it. So if they see him, they're definitely going to tell his brothers and his dad. And he thanks Feyre for saving him. And so now she finally feels comfortable so that she is able to sleep. But that is not good because she is awoken by Eris, which is Lucien's oldest brother.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, yeah, Eris is like, yeah, Dad knows you're here. And his dad's name is Baron. And basically, like, he's pissed. So she remembers Eris because Eris was who was betrothed to Mor, who left Mor like alone in like the woods with nothing, like a piece of note like nailed to her womb or whatever. Yeah, pretty terrible. Feyre has like no power, but she has like just enough to like make fire. So her and Lucien both like shoot flames, and they're able to like collapse the cave and collapse his brothers inside, and they run. So they run, and they know that they're close to the Winter Court, but they have to stop at another cave because it's just like horrible elements. Like it's snow, it's ice, it's freezing. And they go into the cave. There's nothing. Like there's no firewood. There's literally nothing. So they just have to huddle together for warmth. Like they're like, we're going to die because, I mean, I don't know if fairies can die from the elements, but they might. So she tries, like she's basically like mentally trying to shout at Rhys, like just hoping and praying that something will happen, and nothing's going on. And Lucien's like, talk to me about Elaine, like as a distraction. So she's like, she's engaged to a human and he's upset. Like obviously that's supposed to be his mate. And he wants to know if Elaine is worth fighting for. So she basically tells her like Elaine likes flowers and all these things, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you talk about her like she's dead. And I mean, Feyre's like, I mean, that was all before she went to the cauldron. Like I have no idea like what she's like now or if that changed her. And Lucien's like, he's basically going to have to ask Rhys how he'll survive with his mate being with someone else. And he asks, like, basically, when did she stop loving Tamlin and choose Rhys? And asks if it happened before she, like, finally left the Supreme Court for good. And she's like, no. And he says, like, you left us. And she realizes, like, he feels abandoned just like Tamlin did. And she says, you abandoned me, like, when I was begging for help and you weren't doing anything. And basically, like, she tells him, like, you don't fit in the Spring Court just like I didn't fit in the Spring Court. And he's like, well, where will I fit in? Like, I can't be in the Autumn Court. They all hate me. I don't fit in the Spring Court, honestly. He's like, the Night Court? Like, am I going to fit in there? And she doesn't say anything because, I mean, that's kind of true. So they do make it through the night, and she thinks of about the Winter Court because they're headed toward winter. The Winter Court has like sleighs, and they have like these big bears. But she also thinks about how Amarantha killed all the Winter Court children, which was super sad. And it takes another day and night before they can even cross into the Winter Court. And there's like this huge frozen lake. And who do they see at the edge of the lake but Eris and the other brothers? I don't know if we ever get their names. It's not important because Eris is the only other brother that matters. So Eris is over there, like, because all of Lucien and his brothers have fire powers. So he's melting the lake. So Feyre is shooting her ice powers to try to get across this lake. And Eris is like, basically, I can either drown you in this lake and freeze it on top of you because it, like, basically it's so cold it's going to refreeze, or you could take my hand and I'll like, take you over to our court and whatever. And like she gets shot with arrows, and then like he winnows over to her and he slaps her so hard her tooth goes through her lip, which people laugh about all the time because they're like, what do you mean your tooth went through your lip? But I can picture it. Yeah. You ever bit your lip hard? Like, okay. So they're trying to run, and Eris grabs her literally by the root of her hair. He's like dragging her, and then the most epic scene of epic scenes happens. She's like, to Illyrian, or she's like, what does she say? She's like, something slammed into the ice. And she's like, no, not a shadow. It's an Illyrian warrior, blah, 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 blah. So it's like Cassian, boom, slams into the ice. And like his red siphons were like blazing, blah, 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 blah. And then Azriel slams into the ice. And I'm like, I want this to be a movie scene so bad.
Yes.
And so Cassian's like, I suggest you drop my lady. Ah! I love it. And she kicks or knees Eris in the balls and punches him in the face and like runs to Cassian. And Cassian stabs Eris in the stomach. And she's basically like, stop. Because she doesn't want him to kill him because she knows that they're going to need the Autumn Court here in a little bit. So she's like, okay, like I don't want murder. So she looks at them and she says, you all deserve to die for this and more, but I'm going to spare your miserable lives. And they're basically like, who the fuck are you? Or whatever. And so she removes the glamour that she's been hiding her tattoos and she says, I am the High Lady of the Night Court. And they're like, oh, crap. And she tells Cassian and Azriel to take them home. So she goes with Cassian, and Az grabs Lucian, and they go like not all the way home, but they go wherever they could go closest to there. And Moore's there waiting, and she says that Rhys is racing home because he was somewhere else. And Feyre's like, okay, because Moore's like, we're going home, and she's like, well, which home? And Moore says the townhouse. So they get to the townhouse and Lucian is like dumbstruck. He's like, where's the murder? Where's the blood? Where's the screams? Where's the crying? He's like, there's kids playing outside. He's like, Rhys lives in a townhouse? Like, where's the mansion? Where's the castle? Where's the gloom and the doom? None of that. And Feyre says, this is Valaris, the city of starlight. So Rhys comes in and Feyre like collapses into like a ball of tears. Like it's the first time she's cried. And Rhys grabs her and tells everyone else, he says, you guys find something to do. And he like carries her upstairs and he tells her that basically when all this stuff went down with Ianthe and the twins, Rhys went to the Spring Court, but he must have just missed her. But Tamlin was tearing up the forest and Ianthe, like, now she won't leave her temple. And Jurian went back to Highburn, and the Spring Court has basically all deserted Tamlin. And Cassian basically shows his mind to Rhys, like, while all this is going on. So he has a whole rundown of what happened. And he says, you declared yourself as High Lady. And she's like, should I not have? And he's like, no, I wanted to, like, scream it from the rooftop. So, like, I'm glad you did. And she asks about her sisters, and he's like, they're good. They're up at the House of Wind. And Rhys says Azriel, like, she's like, Azriel and Cassian, like, she couldn't believe that they were healed because at the end of the last book, both of their like wings were shredded and like they were on the brink of death. And so Rhys says that Azriel healed like in a couple of days. Cassian took longer and he's still like rebuilding his strength, but he's good. So she asks Rhys like, where were you when Azriel and Cassian found me? And he says, oh, I couldn't let you do all the work. And she's like, where were you? And he tells her that he was on the continent surveying the Mortal Queen's castle. And so she's pissed, like, I'm sorry, what? And he says basically like, they have been super quiet since all that stuff went down at Highburn. And he said he had just gotten there and he was just flying like above and he felt their bond kick back in. So he came back. And so he like taps on her little mind shield and she lets him in. And then he runs a bath for her. And he well, first he magic cleans her because he can do that. But it basically makes you look clean, but you still feel dirty. So then he makes her take a bath and then they have some nice little sexy time. And so now they come back down, everyone's back, and they have matching wedding bands. And Lucian is like, he's struggling. He's like, what? Like, what is going on? Like, it's so weird. Like, it's so surreal. Like, this is not what he expected. These are not the people he expected. There are people here that he did not expect to see. Like, what's going on? So Rhys tells Lucian that Feyre did not just like jump into bed with him. Like Feyre didn't return his love. Like he loved Feyre way before Feyre loved him. And it wasn't until after she left Tamlin. And he says, I was going to let her stay with Tamlin until he decided to lock her in the house and let her be miserable. And then I couldn't stand it anymore. And he tells Lucian, if you like, cause Lucian's kind of being shitty to Feyre. And he's like, if you speak to Feyre like that again, I will rip out your throat. As he should. And so Basically, Feyre, Rhys, and Cassian like tell Lucien like a bunch of stuff about like how Feyre and Rhys got together. And Lucien thinks it's weird that they don't enforce protocol there. Like they don't call each other like, I don't know, High Lord or whatever they're supposed to call each other. And they don't like enforce rank. And he talks about how he was told about Amryn as a kid, and Amryn was like a scary story that he was told at bedtime, and he was told that she would drink his blood and drag him to hell. Which, like, that's all true. Like, I don't know that that's not true.
Right.
Feyre asks about going to see her sister. So they go to the House of Wind, and she wants to see Elaine first before Lucien, and Lucien's like, he agrees with that. But she actually goes see Nesta first, and so Nesta's in the library, and she says that Nesta was always beautiful, but now she's devastating. And Nesta is being Nesta. She is an absolute bitch. Like, oh my god. So Cassian, like, is admiring her. Of course, she's completely awful to Cassian. She's annoyed by the fact that Feyre's, like, intruding on her, and she's like, oh, you're back. And Rhys basically, has not told Feyre, like, if her sister had powers, but she knows, like, Nesta has to have something, because she could tell when she came out. And I just basically wrote, like, Nesta is bitter, because she is. Like, she's just a bitter person. She always has been. And says that, Nesta's basically like, well, I don't have anything to lose. Like, she's not happy to be Fae, but she's like, I never had anything to lose in the first place. But Elaine won't leave her room. She won't eat. And she, like, is basically just wasting away. And Rhys is like, I have been offering to help since you guys have been here. And Nesta's like, well, why would I have told you anything? Well, how else were you going to get it?
Right.
And Feyre's like, well, Elaine's mate is here. And that makes Nesta, like, snap. Oh, well, he doesn't know her. And I mean, which fair, but, like, oh my god. It's just, everything. So Cassian says that, like, because Nesta basically is like, I'll kill you if you bring him, or something like that. And Cassian's like, you're not going to do anything. You won't even train. Because Cassian has been trying to get her to train with him. And Nesta says, what will father think of this, like, with them being Fae? And Feyre's like, well, he hasn't even sent word from the continent looking for us. So, like, I'm sure he doesn't care. And Feyre noticed, like, Cassian's looking at Nesta, and he looks sad, but also, like, longingly at her. And so she goes to see Elaine. Elaine's sitting in this room, like, staring out the window. Her hair is down, which is very unusual. She's super thin. She's just, like, plain face, blank. And she's just basically like an empty shell staring out the window. And all she'll say is, I want to go home. My fiance will be looking for her, and that she's supposed to get married next week. And so Feyre's like, okay, I'm not going to introduce Lucien to her. Like, this is not going to go well. But she turns around and she sees him there, and he just looks devastated. So Rhys gives Lucien a room in the House of Wind, because that's where the girls are staying also. And she gives him clothes, or he gives him clothes, and he's like, I mean, does this cost? And Rhys is like, no, like, it's fine. And Feyre tells him, like, just stay away from Elaine and Nesta until we figure stuff out. And Lucien's like, am I a prisoner? And they basically tell him no, but just stay away from the sisters. Like, don't, if you see them, walk the other way. Like, don't go anywhere near them. So all of them leave Lucien and the sisters up at the House of Wind, and they go to Amryn's apartment to have a meeting, because Amryn's been trying to work on the Book of Breathings to figure it out. So Amryn's pissed because she's like, why do I need a babysitter? Because Moore was there. And she's like, I don't need you all here babysitting me. And Amryn says to Rhys, like, why don't you just kill, like, Baron and Eris and all the other sons so that Lucien can be the High Lord? And basically, they know that they need an army, because there are several territories that are already siding with Hybern, and, like, they either have a lot of people or a lot of money, or both, and none of them have that in the Night Court. So they know that they need to get the other courts to like, side with them. Feyre is like, okay, well, what about Miriam and Draken? Because she's basically like, I mean, Rhys, you did them a solid. Like, they kind of owe you. And before, when she brought that up, Rhys was like, no, absolutely not. But Rhys says he actually went to go look for them, or Moore did. And the island that they're supposed to be on was, like, completely abandoned. Like, it didn't look like anyone was there and, like, did anything to them, but they weren't there. Amryn also is like, okay, well, we need to have, like, a meeting with the, or basically Amryn's like, we need to use your sisters as a way to convince humans that we're not vicious killers. Because, again, not only do they think that all of the Fae are vicious killers, but especially the Night Court, like, they are supposed to be, like, the most vicious. So if they can have Nesta and Elaine, like, talk to the humans, because they recently were human, then maybe they could get them on their side as well. And Rhys tells everyone that he's going to call a meeting with the High Lord in 2 weeks, and that the invitation is going to go out tomorrow. Feyre feels weird because she kind of challenged a little bit in that meeting as High Lady, and that's the first time she's kind of stepped into her High Lady role. And she asked Cassian if he would use Nesta to fix the wall, and he says yes. And she asks him if he noticed that Nesta has some form of power, and he also says yes, even though no one really knows what it is. So they talk to Nesta, and she does agree to come to dinner, even though Elaine doesn't. And Lucien comes down last for dinner, and he ends up having to sit at the head of the table, which he's like, don't you want to sit at the head of your table, Rhys? And he's like, no, like, I know, like, they do not care about that stuff there. And then also next to Lucien is Nesta, I think. And so he's like, please don't make me sit here. Like, please don't make me sit here. And Nesta starts eating dinner, and she basically tells Feyre, like, I get the food now. Because if you remember in the last book, when they went to Feyre's home and Nesta and Elaine were still humans, they had dinner, and Nesta was pissed because Feyre wasn't, like, drooling over the food. And she's like, yeah, because it doesn't taste as good as Fae food. Like, it's the same food, but it's just so much better in Prythian. And now Nesta understands it. She's such a jerk. So Cassian says that he knew... like they're basically like trying to figure out, like, you know, they're talking about like having I can't remember what they're talking about actually, but something about having women or females in the group or whatever. And Cassian's like, I knew when we brought women in it would be bad. And Rhys is like, it was your idea to bring women in because you were the one that said you needed someone pretty to look at. And he's like, Adriel said it too, and Adriel's like, no, I did not. Lucien says that he thinks his dad may join with Hybern if he thinks he can get his power back from Feyre. So they need to figure out what his dad and Eris already know. Because he thinks also that Eris might not tell his dad because Eris wants to be the High Lord of Autumn. So Eris is known to be sneaky as well. So Rhys is wanting to go to the Court of Nightmares to ask Keir for help. So the Court of Nightmares is like what people think the entire Night Court is about, and Keir is Mor's dad, and he doesn't rule the Night Court or the Court of Nightmares because Rhys is technically still over that too, but he's basically in charge of it second to Rhys. And basically the Court of Nightmares does not have to help Rhys if they don't want to. So there's like some agreement that was put in place centuries ago where like they can decide if they want to give their armies. So Rhys knows he's gonna have to like offer something, and Mor's upset because she doesn't want to be offering it. She doesn't want to work with the Court of Nightmares. Like, they obviously are terrible to her, and she doesn't want to do anything extra or work with them any more than she has to. But they're planning on going in 2 days. Feyre agrees to start training with Cassian again, and he's like, 5 a.m. She's like, no. 8 a.m. He's like, 7. She's like, 8 a.m. And she also says that she wants to fly. Cassian says, like, there's literally not enough time. Like, they could go to war at any time. But Rhys thinks it's a good idea because he's like, if it's another chance that she'll have to get away, I'll do it. So Asriel says he'll teach her because unlike Rhys and Cassian, who learned how to fly, like, at birth, basically, or whatever, Asriel didn't get to because, remember, he was in the dungeons because his dad was horrible, and so he learned how to fly later in life, which is hard because then you have all of your, like, mental things. You know, same thing about swimming. Like, you know, you learn how to swim late in life, you have all these fears that you don't really have when you're a kid. So, same thing about flying. Amren then offers to help Nesta train her power, and she wants Nesta to come to the Court of Nightmares and kind of, like, test her powers because she thinks Nesta will be able to, like, sense things. And Nesta asks if the queens were made immortal because that was something that they were wanting, the human queens, and no one really knows what happened because, again, it's been super quiet over there. And Nesta says that she'll agree to help them, but she wants the mortal queens and Hybern all dead. But she wants all that, but she refuses to go to the High Lords meeting. So Nesta and Feyre start arguing, and Nesta threatens to rip her throat out because she doesn't want to tell strangers about basically how she was violated by the cauldron. Which, like, I mean, I get it, but, like, also, like, Nesta, come on now. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. She's just, Nesta. That's all I can say. So Rhys and Feyre take a walk, and he's like, Nesta is difficult. And I love all of, like, the canon theories about, like, I love all the canon theories about ACOTAR, period, but, like, how, like, Rhys and Nesta just, like, hate each other. Like, there's one TikToker I follow, and I love her because she just, like, makes the funniest videos about, like, conversations that they would probably have about how they hate each other. But Feyre apologizes to Rhys about challenging him, and he's like, you have every right to challenge me, and you should continue to do so. Like, you're the High Lady. You're my equal. And he tells her that he may be hurting more by trying to work with Kier, but he says, like, I don't really have a choice. And, like, he has to make difficult decisions sometimes. So Feyre asks, who will I be this time at the Hewn City, which is also the Court of Nightmares, another term for it. Because, the last time she went, she was technically Rhys's whore and, like, was dressed all, like, scandalous. So, but this time she's his mate and the High Lady of the Night Court. So Rhys says that, oh no, so we don't really know what. We haven't really got to that yet. But Rhys starts talking about the meeting and says that all of the courts are going to be invited, basically hinting at Tamlin also is going to be invited. And Feyre's like, I don't really think that Tamlin's going to come, but Rhys says that if he does, the meeting is going to be bound by a magic that will make them all neutral, basically. And if anybody breaks that rule, that there will be a hefty price to pay. She asks if he trusts Lucien because during dinner he showed his wings while talking to Lucien. And he says he does only because they have Elaine right now, and that's all Lucien cares about getting. But he wonders if Lucien gets away with Elaine, if he'll betray them. So Feyre starts training with Cassian again, and Cassian is pretty mad because they hid the fact that she was High Lady at Hybern. And he's like, basically like, as Rhys's mate, you belong to Rhys. Like, without trying to sound so misogynistic, but like as High Lady, like you're mine. Like he's like, you're mine to protect. Like I am here for you. And like he's like, you and Rhys always just want to sacrifice yourselves, and you never want to like allow us to like do the work or whatever. And so he's pissed about it. And basically he's like, the same thing that she did by like doing that little sneaky stuff with Rhys and going back to the Spring Court is the exact same thing that Rhys did with Amarantha. Like when he like went to that dance or whatever and ended up under the mountain for 50 years with Amarantha, it was the same kind of thing. And he's like, basically it went quiet in his head, and like that's the exact same feeling he had when Feyre did that, and he was very hurt by it. Nesta comes out during the training and she calls Cassian an oversized bat who throws temper tantrums.
Love it.
And Feyre's like, please come save me to Rhys. And he's like, this is why I needed to have a High Lady, because I can't deal with this all the time. And he goes, well, I sent you another pretty face. And Azriel like lands and comes and gets her, and he's like, we're gonna go flying. And so he gets her to get her wings out, and he's amazed by her wings because like they're she's not an Illyrian, but they look really good. And she's like, wow, they're so heavy. And he's like, yeah, you can't be dragging them on the ground. And so they basically just practice like wielding the wings. So then Rhys takes her to the library, which is in the House of Wind. So if you go down in the House of Wind, there is a super deep library. And he has always had this library here, but it used to be like scholars in there. But he repurposed this library for only women who are the priestesses who have been abused in some way, shape, or form. So like Moore was down there at one period of time, working with them because she has her own abuse that she wants to work through. Rhys even said he spent time down there after his ordeal with Amarantha and Under the Mountain to kind of like work through his process. But we meet Clotho, and she is a priestess that was horribly abused. Her tongue was cut out, and her hands and her whole body was broken badly, and they were able to heal her somewhat, but like her fingers still go the wrong way. She still doesn't have her tongue. And so like it's really their domain, and anybody can go to the library if the priestesses allow them to come in there. And some priestesses stay there their whole life. Some of them come and just leave. Some people come that aren't some women come that aren't priestesses and decide to take the oath and become priestesses. So it's really a nice sanctuary. And in the middle, like the library is basically like one giant spiral, and it spirals down into this black pit. And no one knows what's at the bottom of this black pit, but 200 years ago, Cassian went down there and he flew back up very terrified and will not let Rhys go down there. And no one knows what is down there that he saw because he will not talk about it. Then, which people talk about this all the time as like Rhys, because right after talking about how this is a sanctuary for battered women, Rhys is like trying to have sex with Feyre in the library. And I'm like, poor timing. But he doesn't, and they do some research, and Feyre finds out that the wall was always meant to be temporary, so it's not surprising that there's holes in it and that it's probably going to collapse no matter what. So Feyre goes home and finds Amren and Nesta doing their first lesson. Amren's basically trying to teach Nesta how to shield her mind because they're going to the Night Court again, and there are other Daemati around who could possibly get into her mind. And Rhys, Feyre, and Cassian are going to go to the prison to meet with the Bone Carver again. So Rhys has to leave her and Cassian there, so Cassian is basically telling her about how he's put several people into, or not even people, like beings and things, into the prison. And Feyre asks Cassian about the bone carver, and that's because that's the reason why they're there. And he tells her that there was life before High Fae, and basically, like, the bone carver and the weaver, they refer to them as old gods. And that the legend is that, like, the bone carver is one of those. And that he's very dangerous, and so they had to find a way how to bind him before they let him out. So no one actually knows how the bone carver ended up in the prison, because Cassian didn't put him in there. So Feyre goes in to talk to the bone carver, and he still appears to her as a little boy. And she realizes that he's appearing to her as the son that her and Rhys could one day have. So she gives the bone carver one of the adder's bones, because again, he likes bones. And the carver says he can still smell his sister on Feyre. And we learn that the weaver is the bone carver's sister. Terrifying.
Yeah.
And the bone carver says that rock, darkness, and sea all shuddered in fear at what happened on the island across the sea when she emerged from the cauldron. And so we assume that that means Nesta. And he says the wind moans Nesta's name. So she tells him that they got the Book of Breathings and they may be able to find a spell to send him home, because that's really what he wants. Kind of the same as Amrit. So, I don't know. But the bone carver does say that he actually allowed himself to be trapped into the prison. He also tells Feyre that the weaver name is actually Striga, and his brother is known as Kasche. How do they say that? Kasche. I listened to the audiobook. I know how they say it, but I can't say it myself. Basically, the reason that the weaver is like stuck where she is because she was tricked into diminishing her powers long ago until she's stuck in that like foresty area. And then Kasche, or however you say it, is confined to the continent. And he basically says that some older Fae were very clever, but the bloodline of whoever that Fae was runs in the human line now. And no one has ever been able to kill his siblings because they're too strong. They were only able to like trick them and bind them into these areas. And he does confirm that they are all death gods and that both of his siblings are actually stronger than him, and says his sister has found a way to eat life itself to stay young, which gross. I'll be like, yeah, because she tried to eat me. But he actually doesn't want his siblings to know that he's alive. And he knows that Feyre and them are getting ready to go to the Hewn City to ask Cure to help fight with him. And he tells her that his sister has a collection of mirrors in the Black Castle, and there is one mirror there known as the Ouroboros, which is a window to a world where all can be seen and told through its surface. And he says that Cure has it in his possession as an heirloom, and if she can bring him the mirror, he will be hers to wield if she finds a way to free him. And so basically, he's offering up to help fight in this war, which I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I want the bone carver on my team. I mean, I do, but like I don't trust you. I don't trust you. So Elaine is still struggling to deal with her Fae senses, but she is trying to like come out of her room, but she talks nonsensically, like in half riddles. So Lucian comes in, and Nesta and Feyre were like in another room, and they hear Lucian come in, and he did not know that Elaine was there because he's not supposed to be anywhere near her, but he stumbles across Elaine, and so he's like, you know what, forget it, I'm gonna risk it all. And so Feyre like puts up a shield to hold Nesta in place, because of course Nesta was about to go storm in there, and she gets in Lucian's mind, and basically like all the other siblings, Elaine looks terrible, and Elaine asks who he is, and she tells him, and Elaine's like, you betrayed us at Highburn, and he's like, you know, it was a mistake. And she says, I'm supposed to be getting married in a few days, and she tells him how she can always hear his heart beating through the walls when he's sleeping, and asks if he can hear hers, and he says no. And Lucian comes into Feyre after that and says that they need to get Elaine out of that house. And so Feyre was like, you know what? All of you guys are going to come stay at the townhouse with us. And so they packed them all up, and Asriel, Rhys, and Cassian fly them down to the townhouse, which causes Nesta to start like vomiting everywhere. Which, you know what? She deserves it. Honestly, I'm not mad. So, Cassian and Azriel have to like draw straws because they both can't go to the Court of Nightmares because someone has to be protecting the city at all times and someone has to babysit Elaine. So Cassian draws the short straw, so he has to stay behind. So Azriel, Amren, Nesta, Feyre, Rhys, and more are all going to the Court of Nightmares. And Rhys doesn't like make Feyre dress scandalous this time. Like she just dresses like she has a crown this time like he does. She wears like dark lipstick. So he goes in and there's only one throne. So he's like, I'll apologize the fact that you only have one throne for this time or whatever. But they make everyone bow and like he puts on his facade and Feyre does it really well too. And so Nesta and Amren like scurry off to go find the Ouroboros basically. And Keir says that he knows that they're there to ask about his army, basically. Like, he's heard that there's a war coming, and he's like, you know, he doesn't want to help them. So he says that he does have a price that would help him do it. And Rhys is like, Rhys tells him, like, I can't force you to help me, but I can kill you. Just remember that. So Rhys brings in his first offer, which is Eris. So Mor is already pissed because, like, obviously there's all this tension with Eris. So Mor's already hurt and betrayed. So Eris is like, he's basically willing to offer Keir an alliance in exchange for his help in the war. And Keir says that, like, it's not enough. Like, Keir's like, I want to go outside because no one in the Night Court is allowed to go outside. And Keir, so basically no one, I keep saying the Night Court, but no one in the Court of Nightmares knew about Valaris either. They didn't know where, which I think that is so weird. Like, where did you think they went? Like,
right.
Like, I mean, they just have like one house out in the woods. I don't know, but that's so weird. You thought this court was only like the 100 people that live under the mountain with you? That's so strange to me. But basically, Keir had no idea where Rhys and all them went when they weren't there, which they seem like they only go there like twice a year. So I have no idea. But he basically, obviously, when Hybern attacked Valaris, everybody found out. So he wants to go to Valaris. And Feyre's like, okay, well, I want the Ouroboros. And he's like, okay, like, you can have the Ouroboros, but like the only way that you can get it is you have to look in it and you have to be able to take it. And he basically, like, when you look inside of it, it's either going to make you mad or break you beyond repair. So while this is all going on, Feyre is trying to mentally talk to Rhys because she's like, why are you working with Eris? And basically Rhys says that he couldn't wipe Eris's mind, so he wants to work with him because Eris has not told his dad about Feyre's powers. Mor asks Eris, like, what do you want? Like, do you want another bride or whatever that you can torture? And Eris is like, I never tortured you. Like, I don't know who fed you all these lies, but I was never going to do that to you. And he's basically like, whatever you think went down is not how it went down. And Azriel is kind of like, so you didn't leave her like stranded in the middle of the woods? And he's like, okay, well, that part's true. That part's true. And he's like, and I regret that part. He said, but you don't know, like, basically what I had to sacrifice or what happened to me as a result of the actions of what I did or did not do. And he's basically like, you know, I hope one day you can understand it. And Mor's like, I do not care. Which, fair. Like, I don't think Mor ever has to like come like be nice to Eris. I don't expect that of her. And Eris says that it's not a bride that he wants. He says his price for helping them is that he wants support for his bid to become the High Lord of the Autumn Court. Which, I don't know how that works because you guys don't have a choice in that. It just magically transfers. Like, who am I going to be bidding for?
Right.
Your dad's not going to step down. And I don't think there's a lot of time. Like, when Rhys and Tamlin killed each other's dads, it's like it immediately just transferred to them. Like, I don't get that, but okay. And he also tells Rhys that he can kill his father and I'll join you too. And I'm like, okay. So after this meeting, Mor confronts Rhys because she's hurt. And also Rhys didn't even warn her about the fact that Eris was going to be coming or that they were going to be working with him. And then she's also pissed because Valaris is like her secret getaway. Like, that's what she has to stay away from her dad and his awfulness. And he just offered that up to Keir. And Rhys assures her, like, I took precautions. No businesses will serve Keir or anyone from the Night Court if they come here. So basically, like, they'll come and they'll hate it because no one will want them and they'll go back home. But I highly doubt that. Amren says or Amryn finds out that they went to go see the bone carver again, and they ask Amryn how she got out of the prison, and she said that she had to give herself up to get out, had to become something else entirely that the prison would not recognize, so she bound herself in her Fae body. Amryn says one day a rip appeared in the sky in her world. Her brothers and sisters fled, but she was curious and wanted to look, and that's how she got trapped here. What is Amryn? What is she?
I heard a theory that she may be like an angel.
Yeah, maybe she is.
Which, that kind of makes
I don't know.
sense. Maybe.
I don't know. So she tells them that they'll have to do the same thing for the bone carver to get him out, like basically make him Fae. And they don't, like, she doesn't think that he'll agree to that. And so they ask, like, well, can you be unbound? And she says, not by myself. And if she ever is unbound, she won't remember them. She says that she basically was originally a messenger and a soldier for a wrathful god in a young world. And Amryn is not even her real name. She doesn't remember what her real name was. Then Elaine appears and said that she could hear something. She says she can hear her crying and that everyone thinks she is dead, but she's not. She is changed like Elaine. And she says she saw old hands wither with age, a box of black stone and a feather of fire land on snow and melting. She says it was angry that something was taken from it, so it took something from them as punishment. Feyre asked Nesta what happened in the Hewn City with her and Amryn, and basically Amryn took her to a room full of treasure and had Nesta look around for weaknesses in their defenses, but she failed every time. So Nesta failed. And then Lucien tells her that they need to get a healer to see Elaine, and they agree because she's just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Rhys comes in to see Feyre, and he basically is starting to regret his choice to work with Kier and Eris. He regrets hurting more, and he feels like he made a bad call, but too late, Rhysy Poo. So they start getting responses from the High Lords. Helion has agreed, so that's day. Is that day or dawn? Shoot. I can't remember if Helion is day court or dawn court. I think I have it later in my notes. But Helion agrees. And Thiessen says yes, but only if it's neutral and safe. Callias wants to bring armed guards. Spring, autumn, and summer courts have not replied. And Moore says she has spoken to Rhys about Eris and Kier. A healer does come to see Elaine, but they don't find anything wrong with her, and they say that they can't enter Elaine's mind because she's cauldron made. The healer does suggest that maybe Lucien can mentally connect with her because they're mates, and tells him to sit with her and see what he senses and can pick up. So Lucien tries to do that, and Elaine tells them twin ravens are coming, one white and one black. All the High Lords then finally do agree to meet, except for Tamlin, so they just need to pick a location. Feyre, in the meantime, is still trying to train with Asriel, but she sucks. Asriel tells her that Cassian and Rhys taught him to fly, and basically, again, like the whole thing about learning how to fly late, and starts to tell her a story about Miriam and Draken. So when Miriam freed her people from what was known as the Black Land, there was like 50,000 of them, and they had to like fly across some like desert to some shore thing. And Draken's people are known as the Seraphim, and they have wings like Illyrians, but they're feathered, so they're like birds, not like bats. And their women all like lead, fight, and rule over there versus like the patriarchal system they have in Prythian. The Seraphim are also really gifted with magic of wind and air. And when she was like flying with them, they were able to cleave the sea into two and like make a path through the water, kind of like Moses. So when Miriam was doing this, basically they had ordered the humans to run, and instead Miriam had insisted on remaining behind to make sure that all the humans got across. And halfway across, one of the enemy armies had reached them. And so Miriam ended up getting skewered by the queen. And so she did almost die. But one of the younger Seraphim, named, I think it's Nephel, saw her go down and was able to reach her in time. And Nephel basically has like tiny little chicken wings. And one of them is malformed. But Draken let her try anyways. But she, like, I don't know. She has like little baby tiny wings. So she finds Miriam like bleeding out, and she was able to carry her and get her to safety, basically. So basically, Asriel telling Feyre this whole story to, like, you know, give her a little boost in the fact that she'll be able to fly one day. So Elaine is still going on with her nonsense. So this time she says to Cassian, "He snapped your wing, broke your bones." And Cassian's like, "It'll take more than that to kill me." And Elaine says, "No, it will not." Oh my God.
My heart, like, dropped to my butt.
Okay, Cassian is not like I like Cassian. He's not like my most favorite, but I also don't want Cassian to die. I don't know. I don't think he will. That's my theory is that he's not. But who knows? So Feyre decides to take Nesta to the library, and Nesta tells Feyre that, because Nesta loves reading. So Nesta tells Feyre that she didn't realize that Feyre never learned to read, which, Nesta, you and Elaine suck. And also, yeah, while we're on the subject, let's talk about them, because they suck. Because it's like, okay, so Nesta is bitter in general. Mm-hmm. But then you're bitter because Feyre comes back, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you turned into Fae. But, like, you were the worst sister ever. Like, at the very minimum, we could just call it even. Like, there should be no hard feelings between the two of us. So she's like, "I didn't know you never learned how to read." How?
Right.
How? What was Feyre? Like 17 when this all started? You've lived with her for 17 years and you didn't know that she couldn't read? You read. Okay. Okay. Anyways. So, as they're in the library, Feyre gets like a really weird sense, and then all of a sudden these two High Fae appear in gray jackets, and she recognized them as Hybern's men. And they blow Faebane dust on Feyre, which stops her magic. And she noticed one of the Fae is dark-haired, one of them has light hair, and they say that they are the king's ravens. And they basically they have like weird eyes and talents. And so she realizes that this was Elaine's prophecy, I guess, or vision. Like, that's literally what Elaine said. And they said that they have come to take Nesta, but they'll gladly take Feyre too, because she's just a bonus. And they say Nesta took something from the cauldron and the king wants it back, because basically the cauldron is not working because she took something from it, and so he can't shatter the wall. So Feyre says, "You guys took a mistake in coming here." Also, like, they shouldn't have been able to come here. One, you can't just winnow into somebody's court, but also the library is like, you can't even winnow into the House of Wind. Right. Even Rhys can't winnow into the House of Wind. So she grabs Nesta and they just start running, and they are running down the circular staircase towards the black pit at the bottom of the library. And so she's like running, she's knocking over bookshelves. And they start talking about how the Mortal Queens were going to go into the cauldron. So the youngest, prettiest Mortal Queen was the first one to go into the cauldron. But because the cauldron was pissed off about something being taken from it, it gave her immortality, but turned her into an old crone. And she is pissed. All she ever talks about is killing Nesta, because they know that Nesta took something from the cauldron. And then she basically, like, tells Nesta, like, you run the opposite direction, and she, like, knocks over bookshelves and blocks the path so that Nesta can't come back the way, like, that Feyre is, and that they can only follow Feyre. So Feyre is going down, down, down into this dark pit, and she gets down there, and she is, like, terrified, and she's like, please help me, and she hears a voice, and it's like, "Are you the High Lady?" And she says yes, and it basically is like, you know, basically like, "Do you want to make a bargain?" And she's like, "What do you want?" And and it says, "I want you to send me company." And it wants the company, because we don't know what it is, it's an it. It wants the company to tell it about life. And she's like, "Okay, deal." And so she says, "Will you kill the two Fae?" And whatever it is says yes. So she closes her eyes and, like, starts to hear terrible things. All of a sudden, Cassian lands and is like, "Don't look," and takes her hand and, like, is able to get her out. So Rhys also, like, gets down there and, like, literally rips these ravens to shreds. So Rhys comes back up and he's covered in blood, and she's like, are they dead? And he's like, yeah, they were basically dead when I got down there, but now they're really dead. And Feyre notices she has a new tattoo because she made a bargain, which Rhys is pissed because he's like, what did you offer it? And she's like, well, I just wanted somebody to visit. And Rhys is like, did it ask for you? And she's like, no. And it didn't say when. So he's like, he's just pissed because he's like, I can't even protect you. I can't protect my home. I can't protect these priestesses. They're never going to feel safe here again. And basically he knows that the King of Hybern had some kind of special spell that he could only use one time that allowed him to get through the wards and winnow into the court. So the King of Hybern was also there and must have left as well. And the reason that he knew what was going on is because Clotho rang some bell in the library that notified them. Also, Amren is starting to prepare to hunt that night and check the city for any other ravens that might have been dropped off when Elaine says that the queen might come, the one who was cursed, the one with the feathers of flame. And Azrael says that the cauldron made Elaine a seer. So Elaine has powers. Elaine says that the sixth queen is alive. So if you remember from the last book, book 2, there were supposed to be 6 queens, but there was only ever 5. And they kept saying that the 6th queen was sick and she couldn't come. Well, that is actually not true. They sold her to some sorcerer. And Elaine can't see who that is, but he possesses an onyx box and he keeps other girls like the queen. And by day, she is in one form, and at night, she is a human again. So during the day, she's like a firebird, but at night, she's human. The queen is supposedly near a lake, deep in the continent, hidden among the mountains and forests, and he keeps all of the girls at this lake. But the other women are different. They have white feathers. The sixth queen is young, probably in her mid-20s, and it's known as Vassa. That's her name. She poses a threat to the other queens because that must be why they turn on her. And if they can find her, she might be vital in convincing the human forces to fight. So Lucien is like, okay, well, I'll go find her. Because basically Lucien is like, I have no other reason to be here. And 2, like, Elaine can't go. And he wants to protect Elaine. So he's like, well, I'll go. And Rhys is like, well, how are you going to find her? And he's basically like, I mean, I got this. So Amren, like, basically spent all night searching through Valaris, but she never found any more of Hybern spies. And then Lucien leaves the next day to try and find the sixth queen. Amren rushes in and says that Hybern has attacked the summer court and is laying siege. So Prince Varian, which was Tarquin's cousin, basically sent Amren a warning to prepare their defenses. And Rhys says that, we have to go help them. We can't leave Tarquin all alone because, like, even though they have blood rubies, they're like, well, we'll take our chances. I don't think he's going to kill us right now. So they grab their Illyrian legions and they go to the summer court. And when they get there, they realize that none of the other courts have even come to help them. So everyone goes, but Amren. I don't think Amren went. So they start, like, killing all of Hybern's soldiers, and they start trying to save the Lesser Fae in the castles. They completely clear out the castle of Hybern's soldiers, and Rhys goes to, like, the shore because there's some ship coming in, and the King of Hybern is on it. So Rhys knew it was a trap to see which High Lord would come first, and Feyre is in Rhys's mind, telling him to kill the king and just be done with it, but Rhys says it's not that simple. And the king is pissed because Feyre killed Branna and Dagnan, on top of all the other stuff that he's mad about. And so the king says it'll take everything Rhys has to try and stop him, and it won't be enough. And he says that he will take Feyre as she mourns over Rhys's corpse. The king tells Rhys that there was room for everyone at the table. Humans, High Fae, Lesser Fae, half-breeds in Rhys's world, but only if they thought like him. But the king says Rhys looked down his nose at the loyalists and says he has no interest in spending another 500 years bowing before humans. So Rhys tries to attack the king, but it's just an illusion until they realize that he's actually not there. He's just using the cauldron to kind of, like, astrally project himself. And the king says this is just a taste of what is to come. And then he disappears. So they all head to the palace and they go in and find Tarquin. And he actually thought that they were there to help Hybern. He says that he heard what she did to Tamlin in the Spring Court and destroyed his territory and left the door wide open for Hybern, who docked in his harbor. And so he's pissed and tells them to get out, which I don't really think this is fair. Like, a lot of people give Feyre crap about this. I probably would have done the same thing. And maybe I'm just an asshole. But I, like, people give her crap about it. Like, I think Tamlin deserved it. First of all, Tamlin let Hybern in.
Right. He agreed to it.
Yeah.
It wasn't her.
Like, what do you mean left the door wide open? There's nothing different that would have happened whether she did that or not. Tamlin was never going to, like, he can say whatever he wants, but he was never going to stop Hybern from taking over. So I'm like, yeah.
He was too naive, like, anyways, with everything that was going on.
He was poisoning them. Like, what were you going to do? Like, he's so oblivious. So I'm like, I'm not putting all the blame on her. And also, I also don't care because he deserved all that.
And I mean, what else was she supposed to do?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it would have played out differently in the long game, and he deserved it. Like, I'm not mad about it. So they ended up having to stay. Like, they ended up pitching like a camp and staying in Adriata in the summer court to help heal some of the soldiers. And Rhys says that the king knows about them and their histories, and that he picked the library because he knows what the library means to Rhys to attack. And Feyre tells Rhys that he just needs to stop playing his role with the High Lords and tell them the truth. Like, stop all, like, that cunning, like, sneaky facade thing that he does. Especially because, like, Velaris is not a secret anymore. Like, just be open and be honest. They do decide that they want to keep Feyre's powers a secret, except for the ones that they got from Rhys, because they do know that is going to be hard for some of the High Lords because they want their power back, which they're not going to get it back. Like, if you kill Feyre, it's going to go back to you. I don't think that's how that works. I don't understand that logic either. But despite the fact that people are dying all around them, they decide that it's a good idea to have sex in this tent with people crying and dying all around them. But hey, whatever. And then they go back home to Velaris. So Feyre and Rhys go back to the prison, and they tell the Bone Carver that he needs to pick something different because she doesn't want to get the Ouroboros, and he says he doesn't want anything else. And so Rhys finally learns that the boy that Feyre is seeing is their future child, and she mentally shows him what he looks like. And they have finally decided on a meeting place. They are going to meet in the Dawn Court, and every High Lord has responded except for Tamlin. Amren says that Nesta is close to figuring out how to seal the holes in the wall. And Feyre this is starting to get ready for this meeting. So she has a crown that she got from Rhys, from like his treasure room, basically. And Nesta has also changed her mind and has decided to come to the meeting. So Nesta says she will come and give her story to the High Lords. She doesn't want to be a coward. And Rhys offers Nesta a job as his emissary to the human world, because Pharaoh's not going to do that job anymore. And she says she'll consider it. And then Nesta and Cassian kind of have like a nice moment, I guess. And they arrive at the Dawn Court. So this is where like my list is. So Helion is the High Lord of the Day Court. Kallias is the High Lord of the Winter Court. Thesan is the High Lord of Dawn. Baron is the High Lord of Autumn. Tarquin is the High Lord of Summer. Obviously, Rhys is the High Lord of Night. And Tamlin is the High Lord of Spring. So in the Dawn Court, Thesan has like peregrines. That's their like animal, I guess. Like they have wings, but they have feathers. I don't know. They're very similar to the seraphim that Draken has. And one of them is Thesan's lover. I guess when they were under the mountain, they like played it off like they weren't because Amarantha was really keen on killing them, and she even made a dress out of their wings one time. Feyre also meets Kallias' wife, Vivian, who is actually really good friends with Mor. Tarquin comes and brings Cressida and Varian, and then Baron comes and brings all 4 of his sons and his wife, the Lady of the Autumn Court. And surprise, surprise, Tamlin comes.
Uh-oh.
So, prior to this meeting, Rhys gave everyone a pep talk. Like, okay, we have to be good. We have to be nice. No fighting, no bickering, blah, blah, blah. They're like taking bets on like who's going to start the fight. And literally they all lose because it's all them. They're all the hotheads. But Tamlin comes in being an ass, and he basically comes in trying to blame Rhys for everything that happened with Hybern. And he says that if you hadn't stolen my bride away in the night, Rhysand, I wouldn't have to take such drastic measures to get her back. And Feyre says, the sun was shining when I left you. I freaking love it. And he says that he planned on making a deal to get out of the deal he had with Hybern, which no, you weren't. There was no way you were going to get out of that. Then he tries to like humiliate Feyre by saying, do you know that? Notice that little noise she makes right before she climaxes? So then he gets pissed because not only is he pissed about the meme mates, he notices that she is High Lady. And he's like, oh, so being on my side wasn't good enough. Like, you just had to be High Lady. And when you asked me about being High Lady and I told you no, basically you ran off to Rhys. And Tamlin is like asking all the other High Lords how they can even think about working with Rhys when he stood by Amarantha's side for all those years. Which, let's not remind you, Tamlin, you literally laid there for all those months watching her abuse Feyre and did nothing. So, like...
How are you any better?
Right. And then Tamlin says, like, he's there to try to help against Hybern. He has info, blah, 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 blah. And that's why he let him into his lands to try to get info. But, like, whatever. And then he just keeps trying to, like, go on and on about Feyre, like, calling her spoiled goods, calling her a whore. So Rhys basically, like, silences him. Like, he can move his mouth, but he has no sound. And then... like, basically, Tarquin rescinds his Blood Ruby threat. He's like, you know, there's no debts between them. And Aerys starts on his freaking tyrant. He starts talking about she dresses like a slut. And Azriel freaking loses it. He blasts through his shield and tackles him to the ground, like, strangling him. And Feyre, like, goes over and is like, Azriel, stop. And Azriel whispers something in Aerys' ear and then, like, goes and sits down next to Feyre. So I would love to know, like, what did he say? And then, so Helion starts looking at all the info that Tamlin brought and says that they should just destroy the king's supply of Faebane first. And then Thesan brings in Nuan, which is one of, like, his craftspeople, and she was the one who made Lucian's mechanical eye, and she believes she has a solution for Faebane so that they can't keep using this powder on them, like, in the war. Then Tamlin starts blaming Feyre again for turning his armies against him and leaving his land defenseless, and he says that the village she wanted to help rebuild is now just cinders. And so Tarquin offers to take Tamlin's people into his court so that they can evacuate. And then Baron starts being a jerk. So Feyre, like, loses it and, like, gets into a fight with him. And so, because he basically starts calling, like, Rhys Amarantha's whore and talks about how, like, him and the other High Lords were fighting to protect their families while Rhys was just, like, doing nothing. And so Feyre starts, like, drowning him with water and, like, doing all kinds of stuff. She's trying to kill him, and Rhys, like, finally gets her to stop. And Baron tries to leave the meeting, but Nessa finally speaks up and asks, like, why does he refuse to help against Hybern? And Nessa says, like, I went to the cauldron. I saw the king's heart. She says he will bring down the wall and butcher those on either side. And Baron says he will consider helping them, and then he leaves. And Vivian and Cressida say that they will fight with them. Tarquin, Kallias, Helion, Thesan, and Tamlin all agree to help as well. Full screen. So that night, Helion comes to visit them, and Helion is a freak. Like, that's just that. Like, he wants to have sex with Mor, Cassian, Azriel, Rhys, Feyre. He don't care, like, who it is. And so he, like, basically was, like, putting on a show during the meeting, kind of like Rhys does. But he's, like, super friendly and flirty. And Rhys explains that Helion, like, he does not discriminate. Like, he likes males and females. And he's been trying to get, like, Mor, Cassian, and Azriel to, like, sleep with him forever. And then, like, because then he, like, is this when he asks, I think he asked Feyre, like, would she want to, or something like that. But Helion basically believes that Baron will join them, because his people and his wife remember the games that he played in the First War. And it cost him dearly. And so basically, the Lady of Autumn, her sisters were butchered during the First War. And when Hybern's forces attacked their estate, her sisters bought her time to run, and she ran and got caught in a trap, and Helion saved her. And what we will learn is Helion and Baron's wife are mates. And that is an interesting question, because Lucian was born after this fact.
And they mention, him being darker than his
skin.
brothers. And
And so, like, she married Baron because it was an arranged marriage. And that they tried to delay the marriage. But her family wanted, like, internal ties. So they sold her to Baron. And he's been awful to her, basically. And basically, we learned that Helion and the Lady of Autumn have had an affair off and on for decades. And that he's probably Lulu's daddy. And Helion doesn't know. Or he chooses not to know, because I don't know why you don't know that.
Right. I mean, do the math.
But she does think that Baron probably knows, and that's probably why he treats him like absolute trash. And it also probably explains why Aerys doesn't want him dead, because he's actually probably not a threat to him to get the throne or get, the High Lord seat. Nesta, comes in and gets Feyre, and she's like, we need to leave. Something feels wrong. And then Rhys and Az, winnow out to check, and they don't find any sign of trouble, so they are like, okay, I don't see anything. So Mor seems to be flirting with Helion, and she takes her to her room for the night, and Feyre asks Rhys why is Mor doing that, and he says they've had, because of Az, because Az is sitting there watching that, and Rhys is like, well, Azriel and Mor have had plenty of opportunities to confess, what they feel to each other. And Feyre remembers, and then after this conversation, Feyre also remembers to tell Rhys about his sister and his mom's wings and the fact that Tamlin had burned them. So Feyre, unfortunately, listened to Mor and Helion having sex all night. And the next day they go to another meeting, and Nesta suddenly starts, throwing up. She's like, something's wrong. It's not her. It's the cauldron. And then they all feel this shudder through the whole land. And Rhys reveals that the king has used the cauldron, and he has shattered the wall. So they all basically just start, disappearing, back to where they need to go. Elaine says they could evacuate their estate in the human lands, and take everyone that they can to Grayson's estate, which Grayson is her fiance, whatever you want to call him. And his father has been planning for something like this for years, because remember, his father is a fairy hunter. And it has high walls, supplies, and ash weapons. And so she asks Rhys to glamour her to appear human so that she can go to Grayson and ask. Castian gives Nesta a dagger and basically tries to coach her on what to use if someone what to do if someone attacks her. And Feyre goes to see Amren about the creature in the library. And Amren tells her that creature is known as Bryaxis. And she tells Amren that she wants to make another bargain with it. And she wants Amren to examine the wards that are holding Bryaxis in the library. So she takes Amren with her, and they go talk to Bryaxis. And Amren confirms that she can break the wards that are trapping Bryaxis there. And Feyre asks if Bryaxis will fight in the war if she frees him. And he says that the library is his home. I don't want to be free. I just want a window so that I can see in the sky. But they all agree to the deal. So then we're going into part 3. I completely skipped part 2. I don't know what it's called. Part 3 is called High Lady. So they all head to the Illyrian mountain campsite with Lord Devlin. To remember, that is the leader of the Illyrians that is the nicest to women, and it's not very nice. And Devlin thinks Nesta is a witch. Because Nesta points at him, and he's like, don't point that witch finger at me. And he's like, everyone's terrified of Nesta. And Mor glamours Elaine, and so that they can go to the human lands. So she goes to Grayson and tells the guards that she's to tell him that Elaine Archeron is here begging for sanctuary. So they are taken to the guardhouse to wait for Grayson. It's a small space, and Feyre and Nesta are also there with her. And Elaine is basically saying how small spaces bother her now. And Nesta starts talking about how small spaces bother her now, and reveals that she hasn't been able to get into a bathtub since the cauldron because she just uses buckets instead. Y'all don't have showers? I feel like they could.
Right.
I feel like they could make that. I feel like they have big tubs. They have humongous tubs.
They're practically swimming pools.
Yeah, girl, you could get in there. I mean, I'm not trying to shame your PTSD, but
find a waterfall. I mean, if anything, find a waterfall.
Buckets. You've been using buckets. Come on now. So Grayson comes with guards and his father notices that Nesta is Fae, and she tells him how she was kidnapped and turned against her will. And they tell him about the cauldron and the wall coming down, and Aleg begs them to open their home to the humans. And Grayson says he'd believe her if she wasn't lying to him, and that he already knew that she was a Fae too, and that a High Lord's son is her mate. And dun 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 dun, Jurian comes in. And he's the one who has told Grayson everything. So Jurian has just been pretending to be mad, pretending to work with Hybern. He tells Rhys to look into his mind and see that this is all truth. And Rhys has conveniently not thought of doing that this entire time. But he says that he wants to find Miriam and Draken so he can apologize. And he also wants to ask for their help. Jurian also says that Tamlin ran back to Hybern after their meeting with the High Lords. And now Hybern is planning to attack the Summer Court again. Jurian also reveals that they didn't kill Vasa. They found a Death Lord with a penchant for enslaving young women who cursed her and stole her away. Elaine tells Grayson that her heart belongs to him, but he doesn't want it, and he demands his engagement ring back, and he says he will never marry her. And Nesta slaps him in the face, as she should, and says that he never deserved Elaine, which is the one good thing that she does. They do all agree to allow the humans shelter on the estate, and Jurian says he plans to go to the continent to kind of like stir up some discord amongst the Queen's courts. He's also planning to kind of like mess with Hybern's like armies a little bit and put like untrained people and kind of mess up their strategy over there. Jurian congratulates Feyre on killing Branna and Dagden, and she says she did it for the children of the blessed that they killed, and he says he knows that's why he chose to trust her. And really, like, Jurian was trying to drop, like, hints, like, this whole time. Like, he was like, I think Rhys is a good guy. Like, right. He was trying to tell you that he was on your side, dude. But you were, like, blind with the rage of Tamlin. So they head out to a war camp to pretty much get prepared for this war. And they fly to meet the Illyrian army. And they're, like, on the border between spring and summer. So Rhys is, like, cloaked the entire like army, and Kyr's forces is with them so that they can surprise Hybern. And they end up making Hybern's forces retreat. And whichever like ones don't, they're able to make them surrender. And then Tarquin uses all his powers to like drown them. So, dang. They also then after that they move their Illyrian camp to the border of the Winter Court. And Cassian ends up getting an injured wrist, and Nesta wraps it for him. So they dig a trench around the camp because they end up being there for 5 days. And Hybern's forces are able to, like, skirt them completely and get around and go to the Winter Court border another way. But Varian wants them to go north. However, he needs Rhys to glamour the camp to make it look like they're still where they're at. So Feyre is like basically helping with the powers on that. So they go to meet Hybern's forces, but they're better prepared this time, and they still start to lose. And Feyre realizes that she needs to find the serial to find the location of Hybern's true army. Because again, they said they had like hundreds of thousands of people or some ridiculous number. So Feyre goes to Elaine to ask her to help find the serial. And she says that the serial's in the middle, which is where like the Weaver and all those like weird beasties are. And so the serial's in the middle near the Weaver's cottage. And so Feyre winnows there and she finds the serial. She asks the serial where Hybern's army is. And the serial says they don't know. And that the king is using the magic of the cauldron to cloak it. The serial says that you can use Nesta to track the cauldron down because like calls to like. And tells her that you can scry with bones to find it, which is so, like, charmed or something. I don't know. So Feyre asks why the cauldron didn't react when she joined the book and then spoke the spell. And the serial says that Feyre didn't basically hold it long enough, but she couldn't because it was like killing her or something. And I was like, that's my neck. No, Feyre said it was killing her. And the serial says that, yeah, there's a cost to use it. It would have drained the life from Feyre in order to bind the books. So Feyre asks if there's another way that they could still use it to get the cauldron to do it. And she asks if nullifying the cauldron would be enough to win. And the serial says it will be enough if they survive long enough to battle afterwards. Feyre asks if the Bone Carver will make a difference in the war, but the serial says that they can't see him because he's not of this earth. Feyre tells the serial that the Bone Carver wants the Ouroboros, and she asks if looking into it will drive her mad and break her. The serial says that only she can decide what breaks her. And the serial tells her that Amren tells her to tell Amren the answer lies on the second and penultimate pages of the book, and that together they hold the key. I would never figure that out. I don't know. What does penultimate mean? I know, but I don't know what that means. The serial then says, the serial is then about to tell her what she needs to stop Hybern when a freaking ash arrow bursts through her throat, and then Ianthe is there and 2 Hybern soldiers. And you know what? This pisses me off, and I really was mad about the serial, but I love this next part, so I'm going to tolerate it. So Ianthe says that she can't use most of her hand thanks to Feyre, and Ianthe heard from Tamlin how Feyre caught the serial before, so she basically figured that she would do the same thing. So she gifted a robe to the serial and then had a tracking spell on it so that she would be able to track the serial and wait until Feyre needed to track it down. So the serial basically like lays there dying and tells Feyre to run. So Feyre runs and it like is getting them to chase her, and she leads them directly to the Weaver.
Yes.
So the Weaver like knows that Feyre has seen her brother and can smell him on her. So she asks Feyre like who Feyre has brought to her, and Feyre says dinner. So Feyre runs in because, again, you know, the cottage has like the door open and it's like super welcoming. And then like when you go inside, the door tries to close, but Feyre like flips around the door and is like using all of her strength to like pry this door open. And of course, Ianthe and the Hybern soldiers are like, you know, they're idiots. So they're just like going straight in, not thinking anything of it. So as soon as they cross the threshold and they get in, she swings right back out and the door slams shut. So Feyre leaves, and then she like sees like some flashes from Ianthe's like little thing on her head, her stone. And then she hears them like all screaming, and the Weaver is eating them. And I think that was such a fitting death for Ianthe.
Yes, I agree.
You know, I love when there's a good justified killing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I don't think people get a deserving death, but that Ianthe deserved.
I couldn't have thought of a better one.
Maybe the Midgard worm.
Yeah.
I would have been okay with that too. But I like this one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Feyre goes back to the serial, and like the serial's still dying, and the serial asks Feyre just to stay with it while it dies. And the serial came even though it knew about the tracking, because Feyre is kind and fought her fear. And the serial says that she told Feyre to stay with the High Lord, meaning Rhys. So back in ACOTAR, when it was like, stay with the High Lord, it did not mean Tamlin. And Feyre stays with the serial and says that she will see that everything is righted. And the serial tells her to leave this world a better place than she found it. And the serial dies. No. And Helion finds Feyre there. And so she uses the cloak on the serial to cover the body. And Helion takes her back to the camp.
That death broke my heart.
I know. That was unnecessary.
Yeah.
So Cassian is hurt. Cassian, like, dude, you get hurt a lot, dude. Like, a lot. So Cassian's hurt again. He has a wound, like a stab wound in his stomach. Actually, it's from his belly button to his sternum. And it's going to take him a little while to heal. And Rhys is super angry as he told Cassian to wait, and Cassian ignored it. Then Mor's angry at Feyre because Feyre just left to go see the serial and didn't tell anyone. So everyone's fighting, and Mor is, like, kind of, like, bickering at Feyre for lying, and Feyre's like, you lie every day. Oh. And Feyre asks Mor why you have never, like, basically made a move on As, or why you went to, like, why you slept with Helion, because the day after she slept with Helion, Mor looks terrible. Like, she looked so miserable and broke down. And so Amren comes with the book, and also she has bones and stones for Nesta to scry. Bones and stones. And Amren tells Nesta to pick them up and then think about the cauldron. So Nesta grips on them, and she's like, it's like she just can't seem to do it. And so Feyre looks into her mind and sees Hybern's forces, huge and endless. She sees the king standing over a war map, and the king has an army like at the edge of the human territory, closing in on their family estate. And then Varian shows up and kisses Amren. This was an unexpected.
Yeah.
Like, whew, it takes some.
I was like, wow.
Takes some gusto to be with Amren, but hey, you know what? I love it. So Feyre that night dreams of the cauldron, and she wakes up and she feels like something is wrong. She thinks her and Nesta opened a door by looking for the cauldron, and the cauldron was able to look back at them. So now the cauldron knows where they are and they can hear it. So Amren, Nesta, and Feyre can all hear it because they were all made. And they realize the cauldron has lured Elaine away from camp by showing her Grayson and promising to love her, and taken Elaine to a Hybern camp.
No.
So Azriel's like, I'm going to get her back. Also, Azriel has been told a few times at this point to stay away from Elaine. Because Rhys has noticed that, you know, he's a little sweet on Elaine, and Rhys is basically like, Elaine has a mate. And even though the Night Court does not, like, honor the whole, like, misogynistic patriarchy of mate things, he still doesn't want, like, Azriel and Lucien to, like, duel it out. Because because Lucien could do that. And also, like, even though Elaine may never choose to be with Lucien, she will technically always have a bond with him. Like, that bond will never go away. It just might weaken, but it'll still always be there. So, like, Azriel's like, I'll go get her, and everybody's like, oh, God. So Feyre's like, I'm going to go, too. So Feyre uses her shifting power, and she turns herself kind of into Ianthe. She takes one of Azriel's siphons and, like, puts it on her forehead like Ianthe's was, and, like, takes a cloak that looks like Ianthe's. Her and Azriel went on into the camp, and Azriel is, like, basically kind of behind her, but shadow, so no one can see her. And she, like, walks into the camp. She sees a child, which is one of the children of the Blessed, hung up on a rack, and they've been torturing her. Jurian sees her and realizes that she isn't Ianthe, but she's Feyre, and he tells her that Elaine is safe and untouched for now, but she's chained up in the king's tent, and there's a spell from the book, like there's something binding her. So Jurian says he'll make a distraction so that they can get her out. So Feyre asks him to also get that girl, the children of the Blessed, so that, you know, they can save her too. So they're able to get in the tent and grab Elaine and run. So they start running towards this cliff, and Jurian told them, like, that way, go that way to escape. And they also were able to get the girl, which, you know, whatever, but, you know. Hey, sometimes you gotta leave people behind. But hey, they got her. So they're, like, running, and so, of course, like, the King of Hybern and his people or whatever are closing in on them, and they're getting close to the edge of this cliff, and Feyre gets hit by a freaking ash arrow. And there are, like, these hounds that are the King of Hyberns, and they are, like, closing in, and they're about to attack her when all of a sudden Tamlin comes out of nowhere in beast form. And so he's able to, like, get the hounds off her. Azriel tells her that she's going to have to fly, which, up until this point, every time Feyre flies, she, like, flies for 2 seconds and then crash lands. So, good God. So he, like, takes off running, and he is flying. He has Elaine, and then, like, the girl is, like, holding onto his legs, and he's holding onto Elaine. So, like, he can't do anything else. And one of, like, the hounds jumps and injures his wings, but he's still able to, like, go. And so Feyre, like, runs and jumps, and then also at the same time, Tamlin is running beside her, and it's almost like she feels this breeze that comes from Tamlin, because he has, like, that wind power with the spring court, and almost like it sends her on a breeze, and she is able to fly. And she looks back and sees Tamlin leap off the cliff and winnow away. So they're all able to make it back to the Illyrian camp, and both her and Azriel are injured, but they make it back. They have the other girl. They learn that her name is Briar, and Nesta appears and throws her arms around Feyre, just, like, sobbing and thanking her. And, you know, everyone gets healed, and Elaine and Nesta, all, like, and Feyre, Elaine, and Nesta all, like, lay together like they used to back in the cottage when they just had that one bed. So now Khalees' army joins them at the camp. Azriel's been healed, but he still won't be able to fly for a while. And Mor and Feyre talk, and she tells Feyre that, you know, you're right, I don't love Azriel. She says, I love him like family, but I don't love him in the way that he loves me. And she says that I can't love him because she prefers females. And she says that she finds pleasure in both, but she actually prefers females over male for their company and connects with them on a deeper level. And she's never told her family that because obviously her family hates everything, so they're definitely going to hate her being a lesbian. And the only thing that, you know, women are good for is breeding anyways, which that would defeat the entire purpose. And so she says that she slept with Cassian because she knew it wouldn't mean anything to him, but she didn't pick Azriel because she knew how much he liked her, and she knew that that would just ruin everything. And she says that Azriel was the one that found her that day with the note nailed to her womb, and he tried to confess how he felt until she panicked and just, like, walked away, so she doesn't want him to say it. And so she says she sleeps with other men because she enjoys it, but also because it stops other people from looking at her too much. And she says the bar, Rita's, that they go to is owned by someone that is basically also a lesbian, and that Moore has continued to hide that part of herself because she's terrified that her family will find out and shame or hurt her, which is like, and it's basically like the one thing about herself that has been untouched by her family. The first female lover she ever had was during the war, and it was one of the female queens, and she was really beautiful and she loved her. But, you know, obviously she was human and she had to like do her royal duties. So she had, you know, children and went on. And so Moore left and she realized it was a mistake and she wanted to go back. But at that point, the wall went up. And so she never was able to go back. But then when she finally did go back, the queen had married and had a daughter and ended up having like a bunch of kids and died an old woman. And so she's just never met anyone that made her feel the same after that queen. But she does say like Azriel is like amazing, but she knows that if like they ever slept together, it would completely demolish everything that they have like now. And she wants him to find someone who can truly love him. And so Feyre promises to keep her secret until she's ready to tell. And she asks why she slept with Helion, and she says she did it to remind Azriel that she's not interested, which I think that is shitty. Like, just fucking say, Azriel, no, I don't look at you that way. I don't want our relationship to be complicated. For 500 years, you couldn't just say that. Right. Like, that's, like, I get all those other things that you're saying, but that's shitty to do to Azriel. Mm-hmm. You cannot love him and also, like, I do think Azriel, like, it's been 500 years, move on.
It's not that hard to friend zone somebody. Like,
just say, I don't want to do it. Right. Like, just say it. Just have the conversation. You don't have to hear what he has to say, but just say, Azriel, I don't want this. It is not good for our relationship. I do not want anything more to happen between us. I want you to be happy. I don't want to keep stringing you along. Please feel free to go and find someone that will fulfill that for you. I mean, good God, that's not hard. Like, ugh. I don't like Moore. I'm not like Moore is like a trope, like one of those tropes to me, and so I don't like it. She like fills one of those like, and I'm like, I just, like, I get all the other stuff you said, Moore, but like, okay, but when it comes to Azriel, like, that's shitty. Like, you're not, that doesn't excuse what you're doing. So, anywho, more from that. So, Hiram's army is planning on moving, and they are marching east, and so the king is planning on marching on the human lands to spite Feyre and her sisters for what they've done. So, they plan on winnowing to the human lands and trying to get as many humans as they can to the summer court. Amren comes in and says that they need to face Hybern in battle and distract him, so that Amren, Feyre, Nesta, and Elaine can get to the cauldron. And Elaine thinks she's found a way to stop his whole army. So they need to get to the cauldron and touch it together. They can use it to bind the king and his army and wipe it off the earth. So they go to winnow the humans out, and Feyre and Rhys go to her old village. And Feyre knows that she needs to get the bone carver, so she winnows to the Court of Nightmares to face the mirror. She climbs a staircase of 1,000 stairs that leads to the mirror, which that would immediately been like, what? Oh, I guess she's in the... You can't winnow in the Court of Nightmares either? Oh my God. I'm not climbing 1,000 stairs. I'm not climbing 20 stairs. Anyways, so she looks into the mirror and she sees just herself until she notices a massive beast behind her, slowly inching towards her. She describes this beast as claws, scales, and fur. It jumps at her and then it disappears. And when she looks back in the mirror, she sees it and realizes the beast is her, a reflection of what lies beneath her skin. She faces it in the mirror and she basically like conquers it. So that was nothing. She brings the mirror to the carver, and he says he will uphold their deal and fight for them. He says he didn't need the mirror, but she did. He wanted to see if she was worthy of helping, and says it's rare to find someone who can face who they truly are and not be broken by it. Like, what's with all the tests? Okay? Why do I have to go to the Weaver and get my damn wedding ring? Why did I have to go through, like, all right, do you want to help me or not? Right. I don't have to do that. Okay? Jesus. So, Hybern has decided to march on the human lands, and he's, like, already tearing up stuff. So, they find Feyre's family estate already destroyed. Azriel gives Elaine his blade, which is known as Truth Teller. And Azriel's wings are still injured, so Rhys has ordered him not to fight. Rhys says it is the first time he's seen Azriel let someone touch his knife. And Rhys then gives, like, this super, like, moving speech that I'm not gonna, like, read the whole thing. But, like, he basically is, like, you know... He's the commander-in-chief. Like, you know, he's the guy. So they go to face Hiram, and they're very outnumbered. And Feyre reveals that she's got a new tattoo as a mating gift to Rhys. And it goes down her spine and it shows the 4 phases of the moon. So as Hybern's shield around his forces come down, Feyre lets her glamour go. And it was hiding the bone carver and Bryaxis. And the ink on her spine is actually a bargain. And then the Weaver shows up because Rhys sent Helion to bargain with her. So they will break her containment spell if she fights with them. And all 3 creatures begin attacking Hybern's forces. They all start fighting. At one point in time, Rhys I don't know where it is in here, but Rhys mystifies half of their army, and I think that is the sexiest thing ever. He literally puts his hand out and looks at Feyre, winks, and just black mist. What? Why would I do anything else? Why would I do anything? But they start fighting. It's super bloody. A horn sounds like there's tons of armies. So Baron's, Tamlin's, and Grayson's human army led by Jurian. Tamlin made Baron come, dragged him out by his neck. And Eris's other brothers are working to destroy Hybern's stores of Faebane. So while this is all going on, Amren, Feyre, Nesta, and Elaine need to be making their way to the cauldron. And Nesta realizes that Hybern is rousing the cauldron. So Nesta begins screaming for Cassian because Cassian is in the sky. And I don't know if you've ever heard the audio, but she's like, Cassian! And so he comes down or whatever, and the king at the same time uses the cauldron and completely destroys all of the Illyrian armies that are in the sky. So had she not felt that, Cassian would have been gone. And then he uses it again and completely destroys the bone carver like that. I'm ain't that some shit?
After all she went through.
I know, dang. And then Feyre realizes that she and Amren will have to go to the cauldron alone without her sisters. So another horn blasts, and there's an armada of ships arising on the horizon, and she assumes it's more of Hybern's army. But then there's another horn that goes off, and she sees thousands of winged soldiers heading towards them. And then there's another armada coming with way more ships than Hybern's, and she realizes it's Draken's legion, and the ships are filled with Miriam's people. So Draken appears and says he heard rumors of a war and jokes that Rhys could have asked for help. When Rhys says he couldn't find them, Draken explains that they put a glamour on the island 300 years ago, so anyone approaching would just see a ruin and be inclined to turn around. But they had been on the island the entire time. He says most of this armada isn't his, but they met up with another one on the way, and he says it was led by a queen named Vassa and that Lucian is with her. Feyre realizes that her father is also with them. How? How did Papa Archeron find Vassa?
Right.
Apparently, he discovered that the queens were traitors months ago and has been fathering an independent human army to face Hybern. He found Vassa and rallied an army, and he told Draken that he had 3 daughters that he had failed for years, and he would not fail them again. And he named his 3 ships after the Nesta, Elaine, and Feyre.
My heart.
I know. The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
I can't stand you.
If anyone's still listening at this point. So, Vassa is flying in because she's a firebird during the day. And Nesta tells Feyre to use her as bait to draw the king out. So she says that it works both ways and that the king doesn't know how much she took from the cauldron. And if she makes it look like she's about to use his power, that he will come running to kill her. So Cassian's like, okay, well, I'll guard her. And Rhys is convinced that, okay, you're all going to die. The Weaver is still alive and hidden near Hybern's forces and was waiting for Amren and Feyre. So she creates a diversion for them by killing the king's guards. And then the freaking king of Hybern walks up to the Weaver and snaps her neck. I'm sorry. Why are they dying so easily?
Right.
All that Feyre went through in the cottage and the Weaver just gets her neck snapped. I'm confused.
I mean, if it was that easy.
He snaps her neck and then throws her to his hounds and they eat her. But then he can sense Nesta's power, so he does actually come towards her. Also, all of the High Lords have beast forms. So they're all out here in beast form. So, I mean, obviously, Tamlin turns into a lion, bear, beast thing. I don't really know. But Rhys is this huge, big, black beast monster thing with like wings and claws and talons, and I don't scare your nightmares. Okay, they all like shoot. Which one is the Winter Court? Callias. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's like a big like white snow monster demon thing. Yeah, like they all have like beast forms too. So Feyre and Amren are, in the meantime, they're going to the cauldron, and Feyre puts her hand on it, and she realizes that Amren has lied to her about whatever is about to whatever is about to happen. Amren says, "I'm so sorry for lying," and Feyre is touching the cauldron and cannot let go. So she sees she can see that the cauldron, as it searches for Nesta, she sees Rhys fully shift. Okay, I was ahead of myself. So she sees Rhys fully shift into his beast form and says he looks like a thing of nightmares. Helion runs towards Rhys and he shifts too. She sees through the cauldron as it locates Nesta, and the king winnows to Nesta, but Nesta doesn't unleash her power because the king is holding their father and has a knife to his throat. Her father says that he loved her from the minute he held her as a baby, and he is sorry for everything. And Nesta begs the king not to kill him and asks he asks what she will give, and she says she'll give it back, whatever she took. But the king kills their father and snaps his neck.
I hate redemption arcs.
Oh my god. Like, oh, that's so terrible. So Cassian begins fighting with the king, but he's losing. And Nesta tells the king that she's going to kill him. The king brings his foot down on Cassian's wing, snapping his bone, just like Elaine said. Yes. Nesta's power explodes out of her, and but the king's able to winnow away. And then Nesta grabs Cassian's sword and turns to the king, but he disarms her and strikes her across the face. So she sends another bolt of power at him, sending him flying back. And Nesta tries to get Cassian up and is like sobbing, and Cassian tells her to go, and she's like, I won't. Cassian says he doesn't have any regrets except for that they didn't have more time together, and he kisses her. He says, I'll find you in the next life and then the next life. And Nesta shields Cassian with her body as the king is like approaching them. And so the king goes to kill them, and then he suddenly stopped. Nesta looks up, and Elaine has stabbed him through the back of the throat with Truth Teller.
Let's go.
Woo! Yes. So Nesta gets up and goes to the king, grabs the blade from Elaine and twists it into his neck and freaking beheads him. And so Nesta then like lifts his head up. It's like freaking like what's his freaking name? With like Medusa's head, and he's like holding her head up. And stares at it. And then Feyre realizes that even with the king dead, his armies are still overwhelming them. So Amren is telling Feyre that she has to fight against the cauldron. Amren reveals that the cereal gave her the message for Amren, but it was a spell that would unbind them. And once she's in her real form, she can wipe out Hybern's armies. Varian appears and tells Amren don't do it. And Feyre reminds her that she'll be gone if she does it, and she won't remember them once she's freed. Amren says that there were humans in her world too, and she used to watch them. She then began, she thinks being sent here was a gift, and that her time with them was a gift. And she tells Varian that she thinks she learned to love with him. Amren gets into the cauldron and tells Feyre the spell that she needs. The cauldron shatters into 3 pieces, and then they see Amren, and they describe her as like a great burning wings with a crown of light, and she just like is floating with like flaming hair, and she just starts destroying all of Hybern's forces, and she completely wipes them out and then fades away. Feyre fills the cauldron and looks inside and sees like the ruins of it, and she can see a void, and basically like the cauldron is what is holding their world together. So because it's like destroyed now, their world is getting ready to fall apart. So she is using the spell that Amren gave her, and Rhys comes and is basically trying to give her extra power, and they are trying to bind the cauldron, but she keeps pulling and pulling and pulling power from Rhys, and Rhys is just saying like, I love you, and he's behind her like, and he's like, I love you, and she finally is able to get the cauldron back together and turns around, and Rhys is dead.
Tissues, please.
And she realizes that he knew he was dying, and that's why he kept saying that he loved her and was saying goodbye. And Feyre is like shouting for all the High Lords to come and like bring him back, just like they did her. And they're like, it's not the same, you were human. And she's like, I don't care, bring him back. So Tarquin goes first, and then the others. And Thesan explains to Feyre how to do it herself, so she drops some of her power as well. And then Tamlin comes and she begs him. She says she will give him anything. And he just tells her to be happy and drops the last kernel of power into Rhys. She holds Rhys and tells him about how she fell in love with him. And Rhys comes back to life and makes a joke and tells the High Lords that they'll be happy to know his power remains his own and he did not gain any of theirs. And Rhys tells her that there's another surprise and tells them to get Amren out of the cauldron. And she was there while the cauldron was sealing and going wherever the dead go. So Rhys basically pulled her back in with him. And Feyre realizes that Amren has basically given up herself to come back, and so now she's just like a regular High Fae. So Elaine, Nesta, and Feyre go to their father's body and basically say a prayer over it and burn his body. Lucien comes and says that he has a lot to tell her and reveals that her father struck a deal with Vassa's keeper so that she could come from wherever it was temporarily, but Vassa's still cursed so that she's only a human at night. Feyre notes that the human queens are still out there, and Lucien says not for long if Vassa has anything to do with it. And Elaine invites Lucien to come to Valaris with them, and Feyre goes to her tent to find Rhys inside with Draken and Miriam. Draken and Miriam fought with Jurian, but Mor convinced them not to kill him. And Feyre asks them if they can hide the cauldron in their island, and they agree. They then have like just basically a big meeting with all the High Lords, the princes, humans, and the Fae. And Feyre finally gets to see Nephil, which is that warrior that Azriel told her about that saved Miriam with the like little baby chicken wings. And she meets Vassa, who tells her that her father was a great man and she will owe him as long as she is alive. Vassa asks if Feyre can break the curse on her, because she's Feyre, curse breaker, and she says she will try, and Feyre has called them all together to try to renegotiate the treaty. Feyre tells them all her story, and then Miriam and Draken share theirs and several others. They don't agree on anything just yet, but Jurian comes to speak with Feyre and says that Vassa offered him place in her court, and basically, I mean, he's human, so he wants to go there. And so our inner circle finally head back to Valaris, and Nesta is now back to being quiet, and she's not talking to any of them. Feyre gave Lucien a note from Tamlin that basically just said thank you, and that Tamlin wishes Lucien happiness and asked him to give it to him if he ever sees them. This next chapter is actually in Rhys's point of view, and it's really just him listening to all his friends talk and laugh. It's like nothing notable, but it's just a nice little POV. And then Feyre goes to find Rhys on the roof in the red lacy underwear that they once joked about her buying. And he tells her that he heard her in death and it made him hold on. And these two idiots make a bargain that when it is their time to go, they will go together. And we learn that Bryaxis has vanished. So even though Bryaxis said they didn't want to leave the library, they don't come back. And they will have to hunt him down at some point and return him to the library. And then they go flying over Valaris together. The end. Oh, yes, it was a long episode. But hey, I tried. It's a long book.
It is a very long book.
It is. Okay. What did you give it?
Such a good book. Give me a second so I can pull that up. I believe that I gave it stars. I gave it some kind of stars. Oh my gosh, stupid thing.
I want to say I did 4.5.
I think I did something similar to that.
I was going to say 6.
I did... Let's see, where'd it go? It's taking forever. 4.5.
Okay. I can't remember. I think we might have recorded something. I'll look. If not, I had some questions. I didn't do any fan cast or anything like that, but okay. So previous predictions that you made. So we knew that Lucien and Elaine were mates.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't really know how that was going to go. You did think that Azriel and Mor might be mates.
Boy, was I
wrong. You thought Nesta would have powers, but not Elaine. You did think that the mating bond would remain good. And you did predict that there would be deaths, but you didn't know who. So we kind of talked about some of these. So let's see. We talked about that. Do you think that Lucien would betray them if he got Elaine? Like prior to the whole war little thing at the end?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Yeah. He's a fox.
Yeah.
He's a sneaky little fox.
I feel like it really could go either way. It could have gone either way with him. My only thinking, and maybe not, would be that he kind of doesn't have any ties anywhere else.
Right.
You know, he just left Tamlin in the situation he did, and other than with Feyre, where else is he going to go?
Where's he going to go? Right. Yeah, I don't really know either. I kind of agree. Okay. What did you think was at the bottom of the library? Did you have any idea?
I had no idea. I knew it had to be something terrifying. But yeah, I had no idea.
Because it doesn't say, I feel like it does, I just didn't put it in there. Basically, like, you just see, like, the most, like, scary thing that you could ever imagine or something.
Like your nightmare, I guess.
Is what it presents to you as. Do you think that Rhys was right or wrong in offering Valaris to cure and bringing Eris in?
Both. He kind of went in knowing that everybody went in knowing that there would have to be some kind of bargain, but I think he was wrong in not discussing it with everybody beforehand, preparing, especially bringing in Eris and not, preparing more for that.
Yeah.
So how he went about it was wrong for sure. Whether he was right or wrong in doing it in general, kind of on the fence.
Okay. I don't think he's wrong in what he offered them. I do think that he should have talked about it with more first, or just everybody. But yeah, I think he should have warned more that that's what he was going to do beforehand. Do you think Tamlin is on his way to a redemption arc? And if so, what does that mean for Tamlin?
Potentially. I don't think that he's necessarily as bad of a guy as he's made out to seem. Is he a douche? Absolutely. But I feel like I don't trust redemption arcs. Because a lot of the times they're like false arcs or they die.
Right. That's what I was like, what does that mean? Is Tamlin dying?
Potentially.
Okay. Do you think that Amren and or Rhys should have come back? Because a lot of people are upset that they both came back.
I'm not upset that they came back. I do think that it puts this expectation on death not being final. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily like it in terms of that. I would have been devastated.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. I have actually never, like, word for word read the chapter of Rhys dying. Because before I read ACOWAR, I knew that he did. So I just skipped that part. I've never, like, physically read, and I just skip right over it every time. I know what happens, and I won't actually, like, read the words on the page or listen to it. I won't. I just skip over it. I just fast forward a little bit. I don't want the trauma. It's like when I watch Vampire or the originals, I skip the last season and restart. I just do.
Oh, speaking of, so the after reading this, because I talked about like not really casting people because it was difficult for this one, but I do have one person that comes to mind in terms of like who I would cast, and it would be more as I don't know her. Yeah, Rebecca.
Yes, and I don't know why I can't think of her name right now, but yes. Oh my god, yeah, she would be really good. I love her. Well, okay. What do you think about the bargain with Feyre and Rhys? The whole you die, I die.
I hate it.
Like what kind of stupidity is that?
Right.
That is dumb. Why? Like, why?
Right, and, I mean, obviously, I don't know what all happens because I still have 2 books left to go. But, with the Bone Carver, they presented to Feyre as,
a kid.
Their potential future child. And I'm like, you have a kid and...
You're both going to die.
You're both going to die because you guys...
Agreed to.
And you're going to leave your...
And you knew that before the bargain, too. Like, you knew that you're potentially going to have a kid. And you're still like, oh, but this love is so great. Like, that's dumb. There are other people that care about you.
Right.
I know. I hate it. So, okay. Last two questions. What is Nesta? Like, what is going on? So, Elaine's a seer. Like, what is going on with Nesta? What is it? Like, what is it?
I honestly have not figured Nesta out. I had that feeling about Elaine. I knew she had some foresight, like, as a seer, but Nesta, I don't know. To me, I feel like she's the embodiment of maybe, like, power or magic itself. But what do I know?
So the next one is A Court of Frost and Starlight. So it's a novella. It's basically like Winter Solstice, which is Feyre's birthday. And we kind of get POVs from from different people's chat or point of view. Like, where do you think they're going from here? Because Hybern's gone. So, any thoughts of anywhere?
No ideas.
Anybody could be going?
No predictions.
Okay.
Nothing. There's nothing going on up here right now.
There's no one's hope. Nothing's going on. Okay. All right. So that was A Court of Wings and Ruin. So next month we'll do A Court of Frost and Starlight, which will be so short. You guys are going to be like, what was this? That's going to be like maybe an hour. But next week we are doing Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I'm so excited to read it. Keely's already done and she was like, it was so good.
Just finished it. Love it.
So I'm excited to read it. But yeah, so if you're not already, make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Booktrospective. Also, we have a website, which is booktrospective.com, and kind of a YouTube, but I'm failing over there, so there's that. But make sure you rate and review our podcast episodes, and please, please, please share them with a friend. We highly appreciate it. And I think that's all. Anything else?
That's all from here.
All right. Bye.
That's all, folks. Bye.